One.
Good evening, folks. It's always nice to have a meeting and see a full room. I want to thank all of y'all for coming out, and welcome to the High Point City Council's meeting for September 19th. I really appreciate you being here, taking an interest in your local government. We're going to begin our meeting with a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'll just ask everyone to rise for that, please. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Before we get to our regular agenda, there are a couple of items. The first is a proclamation regarding National Recovery Month. Is there someone here who I'm supposed to be presenting this to? Okay. Let me have y'all stand, and I'll read the proclamation. Right there is fine. Right there is fine. Whereas mental health and substance abuse disorder treatment are an essential part of health and one's overall wellness. And whereas recovery from alcohol and other drug use occurs every day through a variety of recovery support resources and treatment programs. And whereas prevention efforts are essential, evidence-based treatment is effective, and people recover across High Point, throughout North Carolina, and around the nation. And whereas we must encourage family and friends of individuals with mental and/or substance abuse disorder to implement preventive measures, recognize the signs of a problem, and guide those in need to appropriate treatment and recovery support services. Whereas education about addiction and recovery is critical to combating the stigma and discrimination faced by individuals in recovery and individuals who are still struggling with substance abuse disorder. And whereas the Recovery Month observance continues to recognize the importance of work to support the lives of those affected by mental health and/or substance abuse disorders by raising awareness and educating communities about the evidence-based services which are available in High Point. Now therefore be it resolved that I, J.W. Wagner, Mayor of the City of High Point, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2022 as National Recovery Month in High Point, North Carolina, and call upon the residents of High Point to observe this month with appropriate programs, activities, and ceremonies to support National Recovery Month.
My name is Caroline Drake, and this is my daughter, Caitlin Drake, and she unfortunately lost her battle with substance use disorder in July of 2020. That has led me to find my way to my own recovery. I have come in contact with Caring Services, I'm now on the board of Caring Services. I wish I had known about Caring Services when my daughter was struggling, because they are definitely a much-needed resource that there's no other place like it. They offer extended housing for folks up to 2 years, which is unheard of, and that's what's lacking in our recovery system is the 30 days and then putting people back out. And they're great while they're in, but it's dealing with life when they get out and all the triggers that involves that. But I just wanted to just reinforce how important this community is and how many friends I've made at Caring Services, both staff and clients there. And I just am grateful to be a part of it, and just wanted to bring awareness to that it can happen to anyone. It's not a moral failure, and I think that's something that's important for us all to remember. Thank you for letting me speak.
Next item on the agenda, if you're making your way out, please do so quietly. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, I would like to recognize Matt Love, who is president of NCBIA. Is Matt here? Oh, there's Matt. Okay. So many folks coming and going. It's hard to tell. The podium is yours, sir.
Good evening. My name is Matt Love. I'm the president of the North Carolina Building Inspectors Association, and I appreciate y'all letting me come to speak. First off, Reggie knew that he was getting an award tonight, but I don't think he realized he was getting two. But Reggie has served on our board for many years. One is one of the education co-chairs. He's actually one of our more seasoned inspectors and board members. We rely on him a lot for advice and knowledge, and he is an asset to us, probably as y'all as well. The first award that we're giving him is the President Choice Award, and this award was given by last year's president in recognition for his contributions to the Education Committee. Last year, one of the things the Education Committee contributed to was promoting consistency across the state of North Carolina. And we reached over 700 inspectors. So he had a huge impact with that. So the first award is the President Choice Award. And the next award is the Edison Hubert Johnson Award, which is actually North Carolina Building Inspectors' highest award. It recognizes an individual for their active participation. I gotta read my notes. Leadership, dedication, and professionalism over their career in code enforcement. Displaying the traits of the first president of the association. Edward Hubert Johnson was the first president. And this individual has not only distinguished themselves within their jurisdiction, but whose service to the association and its statewide membership has been invaluable. All right, and so this award was actually presented at the annual conference in August, and I wanted to make sure that y'all knew that Reggie won this award.
Reggie, come on, you can't hide back there. Now when people ask us about our inspections part, we'll get to call them the award-winning. That's right. That's right. Our award-winning head of our inspections department.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, let me say just quickly, I want to thank North Carolina Building Inspectors Association for this. It's a special recognition. I've been doing this a long time, And this is really special. And I want to thank the city of High Point for the opportunity to serve. This is a dynamic growth area, and we want to be part of facilitating that growth. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Rick. Okay, the next item on our agenda is our strategic plan update. Councilmember Chris Williams is normally here to do the Community Development Committee item, but Lori, I guess I'll handle it today. And Lori, tell us what's going on with our blight reduction.
I'll tell you. Let's see. Did it? Can you help me? Yeah, I don't know what.
Speed up my feet.
Is that? Yeah. Where's? Oh, it's down there. I can't see it. It moved. Oh, that's what they're here. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Sorry. Thank you. So for the strategic update for August, good evening, Mayor, City Council, City Manager. One of the things that Chris had asked previous was for me to give an update of kind of what some of the things that he reads into the record are. Since he's not here, he's not going to read them, so I'll kind of summarize it for you. So one of the things that we receive and he reports on are minimum housing complaints. And in August of 2022, we received 24 housing complaints. So complaints are come from tenants typically. It does not come from, we can't receive complaints from neighbors or anything like that. We do get referrals from the police, fire, EMS, and then the inspectors, of course, are proactive when they go out. So when I report on this number each month, so the 24 complaints does not include anything proactive by inspectors or referrals from PD or fire. That's just strictly complaints from the citizens. And then the demolition cases that we bring before you each month, the threshold for those is 65%. So the repairs have to exceed 65% of the value. So an example is if the house is valued at $100,000, has to be $65,001 or more of our estimated repairs in order to bring that case to you. So if the house value is really low or the repairs are really high, that could really affect that. So sometimes that's why some houses maybe don't look quite as bad, but their value, and it's tax value, and that's across the state with minimum housing that most cities use as the tax values. And then public nuisance complaints, these are different than housing. They can come from anyone. This number only includes complaints, sorry, I threw myself off for a second. We get complaints from anybody. Anyone can file a complaint on a public nuisance. So a neighbor can complain about their neighbor's grass. But when I report these numbers, it is strictly complaints called in from citizens. It's not proactive numbers from inspectors or referrals, from maybe solid waste if they're riding by, or PD if they see something. And under public nuisance complaints, it is also unsecured structures, and that could be residential or commercial. So we get those complaints as well, and they are reported under the public nuisance. And for the public nuisance complaints for August, we had 220 complaints that came in. The city cleaned 79 properties that were not cleaned by the owner, and owners, we had 262 cases that the owners did clean themselves. Zoning complaints can be from anyone as well. And then these include things such as front yard parking, someone's installed a fence or a sign without a permit, business may be operating not within the required guidelines, and then land being developed without proper authorization. So somebody starts building something, they don't have their proper permits, start clearing land, things like that. We may go, biggest thing I think is people start putting in parking lots and things like that and don't have the proper permits. And then the large vehicles in residential areas, which we've discussed those before, such as tractor trailers and all. And then for the complaints for those in August, we had 37 complaints. And then for the signs, we did work on a Saturday, and we collected 66 signs. But for the month of August, we collected a total of 167 signs from the city right-of-way. And so that would kind of be Chris's report. And then y'all said a while back, always save the best for last. So we have a house that's been repaired, and I put together kind of a collage of pictures over the years. And this is what the house looked like around 2017, 2018, when apparently it was up for sale at some point. And They actually had some interior pictures. We did not have any interior pictures. And then in January of 2022, we started a case on this in 2019 and tried to work with the property owners. I believe it's been sold 4 times since 2016 with unsuccessful getting repaired. But this last one was successful. So in January 2022, this is what the property looked like. We talked with the owners, told them they needed to get things moving along or we would be bringing it before City Council. And they did not do very well on that task. So I prepared it for April 18th of 2022 to bring it to you all. And as you can see, the house didn't change too terribly much. But shortly after that meeting, they sold the property to another business, and they came in and repaired it. And as of August 25th, it was completed and repaired. And this is what the interior of the house looks like. Well, exterior and interior.
Wow.
And that's it. Oh, one more thing I do want to let you all know. We gave an update to the committee a couple of weeks ago, and just to kind of let you all know that you may be seeing less of me coming before council, that we have from 2016 to 2022, the city has demolished 150 houses. And owners during that same time period demolished 120 houses. And at the time that I did the report for the committee, we had 233 active housing cases, and of those, 91 were repair or demolish cases. And out of the 91, 50% of those had permits and were actively making repairs on the house. And the others were in various stages. Some, had just started. They were having hearing and order process, and some actually have ordinances to be demolished, but 46% of them are actively being worked. So they invited me back to council, but I'm going to try and not come if I can help it, and which is good. That means we're not having as many cases and the houses are being repaired. So I just wanted to give you an update on that as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. You do a great job, Lori. I know that's not an easy task.
Thank you. All right, Councilman Holmes, update on our marketing and branding task force.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our place branding agency, Civic Brand, joined us for the Labor Day weekend from August 31st to September 3rd, and we hosted a few public engagement events around the city, and we were kind of overwhelmed at the response. People were actually waiting for us to get there. I would like to think that they were enthused about doing the survey and not the free beer, but they were waiting for us to get there and responded to the survey. So to date, we have over 1,000 responses, and half of those came during that weekend, over the Labor Day weekend. And so the contribution back to local businesses was well over $1,000. And at this time, all of our equity targets have been hit, so we've got a great cross-section of the city from voices from different communities, and that's what we were shooting for. The next steps is that we have one more level of data collection to do, and then we'll move into the design phase. And so we'll look at some testing of messaging and slogans and new decals and things of that nature. So we're moving along, and we'll engage stakeholders from there. And so really pleased about the effort and the response from the city.
Thank you. Awesome. Anybody on council have any questions regarding either of these two items? Good? Okay. All right. Next on the agenda is the public comment period. Public comment period is held generally on our first meeting of the month, but we didn't have a first meeting of this month because of Labor Day. So we're doing public comment tonight. Anyone can come and speak during public comment period on any item that you would like to. If you're here to speak on an item that has a public hearing later in the agenda, I would just ask that you reserve your comments for that public hearing instead of during public comment. When your name is called, there was a sign-up sheet out front, and the folks who signed the sheet will get to speak first. And if there's anyone who would like to speak after that, you'll still have an opportunity, even if you didn't sign the sheet. When your name's called, I ask that you please come to the lectern, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. I would ask you, out of respect for your neighbors and fellow residents, that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And if there's a large number of people here all speaking on one thing, it'd be great if you had like a spokesperson instead of all of you coming out. So, with that, first person on the list is Willie Davis. Next person will be Reverend Frank Thomas.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Willie Davis. I'm a resident of High Point, North Carolina. I live at 1436 Northampton Street. I'm here to speak as a citizen, as a resident here, although I am chair of the Human Relations Committee here in High Point. I'm here to speak about fair housing. That was, I think, back in the spring that your council took a vote on. We was told that although it didn't pass, the one ordinance didn't pass, that council would revisit it or come back to it and look at it again. I'm here just to ask, do you have any idea when that may happen? And if, I hope I'm using the correct word, if possible, can we have a public hearing or a public meeting with council, the HRC committee, and other stakeholders that may be interested in hearing about this? I thank you for your time, Mr. Mayor. I thank you, City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Thank you. Reverend Frank Thomas, and the next person on the list is Viviana Dinan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Reverend Frank Thomas, a pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church at 753 Washington Street. I am also here to talk about the Fair Housing Ordinance. Several months ago, I was here to talk about it, and because of the summer and moving of meetings, and I don't know that many people have spoken on it, but it's not going away. You just heard a report during the strategic plan update that in the month of August, there were 24 minimum housing complaints by residents in our city. Those people aren't here tonight, but I speak for those 24 people. With a fair housing ordinance, we would have measures in place where those people could have some resolution to their complaint. I don't know what the outcomes were of those complaints, but without a fair housing ordinance, we don't have a policy and an ordinance in place where those citizens have some recourse. So I'm asking City Council to revisit the Fair Housing Ordinance. The Human Relations Commission put in some hard work for over a year to develop this ordinance, which you asked for. And then when they brought it to you, I understand it was voted for in committee, and then when it came before council, it was not approved. I humbly, respectfully beg of you, do right by our citizens so we can all live in the single most livable, safe, and prosperous community in America. Without fair housing, without minimum housing requirements being upheld, then all of our citizens are not being represented fairly. Have a good evening.
Good afternoon. My name is Viviana Dinan. I'm a resident of High Point. I moved here back in 2005. I'm originally from Ecuador, and I'm speaking on behalf of my community. Let me tell you my story very quickly. I moved here in my early 20s with my dad, and well, the first thing we have to do here is find a house. And because of the issue I had with communicating, I'm still hot, so I'm sorry if you don't understand what I said. But with all these issues of communicating with people, it's very hard for us to find a nice house, a safe house. So my father and I, we found a house that we could afford at the time. So we rent this small house that, if you saw that little house that you need to repair, it wasn't as bad, but it was in a bad shape. So, and well, I came here, like all immigrants, we have to work hard. So I start working from 3, 4 in the morning for 8 hours from Monday to Saturday. And I was a serious runner, so I love running. I used to go run, do my practice after work, and then after at night, I used to go to GTCC to learn English. And when one day I came home, that was many years ago. So when I returned home, I found my house was broken. So it was pretty sad because they took my computer, a brand new computer that I bought I was thinking I would go back to college. So I had this nice computer that I bought. They stole all my money, my father's money. We had some belongs. They took that. So it was very disappointed. I was very disappointed at that time, and I was very sad that when I went to talk to the landlord, well, he didn't have a positive, I will say, some advice at least to tell me something that could be done. But he said, well, I'm so sorry for you guys that you're good people, is what I understood. And because of my my issue with communication, I didn't report it. I didn't say anything about it. So I think this is a problem, an issue that many families from my community have to deal with every time. They probably have issues, same like me, communicating. They probably have problems of...
Just finish up.
Yeah, well, let me finish. So the point is here, when I came here to High Point, to the United States, more than 15 years ago, I think I just fell in love with this city. This is a beautiful place. This is a beautiful place. But I also, I think it is very critical that we can create a channel of communication so we can let people know what our issues are. I think it's a critical thing for the good of our community, so we can live in a safe community. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak during the public comment period? Yes, ma'am. Please come forward and give us your name and address for our record.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Constance Reynolds. I live at 3016 Sherrill Avenue, Apartment B, in Jamestown, but I'm in Ward 2. I'm City of High Point, born and raised. I am here on behalf of RITC Electric Specialists. And once again, we are here to thank the City of High Point, especially Parks and Recreation, for working with the 11th John Coltrane International Blues and Jazz Festival. I hope those council members who were able to attend had a wonderful time. And we are looking forward to working together to make next year's festival even bigger and even better on an international level. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else who would like to speak during public comment? Okay. Seeing none, I will then close the public comment period, or public comment period. And we'll go to our next item on the agenda. That is our Finance Committee items, and for that, I will recognize Councilman Britt Moore, who chairs that committee.
Thank you, Mayor Wagner. Finance Committee met with staff and went through all the agenda items. Everything was answered in accordance to our approval, so this is a consent agenda that I am presenting for approval to full council.
Okay. There's a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items for finance. Are there any comments? Questions? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor of approval, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. By the way, for those listening online, one of the things I didn't do at the beginning of the meeting is note who is present. All of council is present except for Councilmember Williams tonight. So we have eight members of council present. All right, next.
The public hearing.
Yep. Next, there's a public hearing item. Councilman Moore has asked me to handle that item. This is a public hearing regarding agreements for performance-based incentives for iHeartMedia and Entertainment Incorporated. And I will recognize, I think, someone from our Economic Development staff, and there she is. Sarah?
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor, members of council, manager, and citizens. I'm Sarah Stevenson, manager of High Point Economic Development. Tonight, on behalf of Department Director Sandy Dunbeck, as well as our colleague Montana Brown, we are pleased to bring you a proposed downtown office project. The company is iHeartMedia Triad, a division of iHeartMedia and Entertainment, Inc. iHeartMedia is the #1 audio company in the United States, reaching 9 out of 10 Americans each month through broadcast and digital delivery. With us here tonight on behalf of the company is Kelly Holman, Triad Market President, and she will present to you shortly. This national company is considering relocating its Triad operation to the Bedrock Building at 275 North Elm Street. Should the company choose to do so, this would result in 20 jobs with an average annual wage above $93,000 coming to our downtown. iHeartMedia Triad is considering leasing 3,250 square feet of space on the Bedrock second floor for 10 years with options to renew. A $1.6 million capital investment is anticipated for the space, $1 million for upfits, and the other $600,000 for furniture, broadcast, IT, and AV equipment. Based on discussions with company officials and the alignment of this project with the city's revitalization goals, our department recommends $177,664 under the targeted downtown incentive policy to help locate this potential project. The policy can offer 80, 60, 40, and 20% of base rent over the company's first 4 years of their lease. The source of this funding would be the City of High Point Economic Development Incentive Fund, which is funded by general and electric revenues. All incentives would be subject to the company meeting the benchmarks set forth in its performance agreement and then paid as cash grants post-performance. At present, iHeartMedia has not executed a lease and the proposed space remains available. The company anticipates making a decision within the next 60 days. At this time, I will turn it over to Ms. Kelly Holman with iHeartMedia Triad to share more with you about this company and its potential positive impact for our city. I'll pull up your presentation. Thank you. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Raise this up a little bit. Yes,
It's fancy.
it is fancy. Hydraulic desk, I love it. Technology. Mayor and city council members, thank you so much for having me tonight. I am thrilled to be here and really excited about the opportunity to potentially be a very active part of the High Point community, and we're very excited about this project, so thank you for having us. Again, my name is Kelly Holman. I am president of iHeartMedia Triad. I'm here to tell you a little bit about my company as a whole, nationwide, but then more importantly, a little bit more about iHeartMedia Triad locally and our mission. So, as Sarah mentioned, who is iHeartMedia? We reach 9 out of 10 consumers on a monthly basis. We do that through multiple platforms. We own and operate 850 radio stations in 150 markets across the country. We reach lots of fans through 8 social media platforms, which is 7 times more people than the next target audio service, which is Spotify. So it has a very big reach. We reach more registered users on a digital and mobile platform than Pandora and Spotify combined. We execute events all across the country. You may have heard about the iHeartRadio Music Festival in Las Vegas. That's one of our events. And we also execute many other live concerts, fundraisers, and broadcasts in our local communities. We're the #1 podcast publisher with monthly downloads, and we deliver our audio on thousands of other platforms and connected devices like smart speakers. So that's who we are as a company, but who are we locally? So we are iHeartMedia Triad. We own and operate 5 radio stations in High Point, Winston-Salem, and Greensboro. All of them have 100,000-watt transmitters. 2 of my radio stations are actually licensed in the city of High Point. The brands that we own and operate locally are Real Rock 105.7, Mix 99.5, Q104.1, which is my country radio station and home of the Bobby Bones Show, News Talk 94.5, WPTI, and Hits 100.3. We reach 842,000 listeners on a weekly basis in the Triad. Our listener base is comprised exactly of 50% male, 50% female, 7% African American, and 6% Hispanic. Our 5 radio stations currently broadcast out of our facilities, which are located at 2B Pay Park, which is directly behind the Hilton Garden Inn, off of Route 68. Our staff, as Sarah mentioned, consists of 20 employees and is growing. After an extensive real estate search, I fell in love with the location here in High Point. I looked at a lot of different real estate sites. And when I went into the building and looked at this 10-year lease in the city of High Point, in this community, I just fell in love. I mean, it felt like home to me. So we're very excited about the project. We continue to grow our brands, ratings, revenue, community involvement, and staffing, as I mentioned. And we serve the community with 24/7 broadcasts, news, talk, sports, music, weather alerts, public affairs programs, contests, promotions, live artist performances, and public service announcements. So we are a 24/7 business. We never close. Locally, what do we do as far as community involvement in the Triad? We're very involved locally, not just in the High Point community, but Greensboro and Winston-Salem. We are a sponsor of the High Point Holiday Party. We're very involved with the American Heart Association, the High Point Rockers, the John Coltrane Jazz Festival, LGBTQ Pride, Toys for Tots, Tools for School, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and many, many more. This is just a partial list of the community involvement that we're able to do locally and nationally. So with that being said, we hope to activate with many new partners in High Point. We already do have High Point partners, but just living and broadcasting from these facilities here would give us the opportunity to involve a lot more partnerships in this community. So with that being said, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate your time and listening to a little bit about iHeartMedia and locally in the Triad.
Anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, Sarah, do you have more for us?
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Kelly. So Mayor and Council, High Point Economic Development concludes with 2 recommendations for you. First, that City Council authorize up to the $177,664 in performance-based incentives for iHeartMedia Triad. That second recommendation is for you to also authorize the city manager to enter into a performance agreement that would set forth performance benchmarks for the company to achieve in order to then receive those financial incentives. That is it from us, Mayor.
Public hearing is open. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on this item? Okay, not seeing anyone. Then I will go ahead and make a motion to approve. Whoops. Yeah, close public hearing. Public hearing is now closed. I would like to go ahead and make a motion then for approval of the $177,664 in performance-based incentives and to authorize the manager to execute contract or performance agreement with iHeartMedia Plus Entertainment Incorporated in that amount. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? we're all in love with High Point too. So we're happy that you're in love with our city, and we certainly hope you'll be happy there. And I look forward to seeing you when we're eating at the Stock and Grain, or looking from the into the outfield from a Rockers game, and seeing your offices there. So I hope you'll be very happy.
Thank you.
All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. I believe that's it for finance, Mr. Moore. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Next on the agenda are planning and development items. The first one is zoning map amendment 22-14. Let's hear from our staff on this. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this was continued from a previous meeting, and we've had some changes. So I look forward to hearing an update.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Mayor. Herb Shannon, Senior Planner with the City of High Point Planning and Development Department. And at your July 18th public hearing, you had a public hearing regarding zoning case 22-14, where the applicant was requesting rezoning of a 2.9 acre parcel of land located within the residential neighborhood lying north of East Chester Drive and west of University Parkway. The parcel was along the north side of Hugh Trail Drive. The applicant was requesting rezoning from the single-family 3 or R3 district and is requesting rezoning to a conditional zoning residential multifamily 16 district to support a multifamily project. At the previous meeting, staff had outlined a recommendation of denial due to concern regarding compatibility with the abutting single-family neighborhood, as the site is surrounded on 3 sides by existing single-family homes. We had noted that a more desirable development pattern would be that all of the land north of Hugh Trail and west of Bridges be rezoned, so you have a larger area for development and not have a situation where you have a multifamily lot surrounded by single family, or that if higher density residential use is proposed, that development be from the outer edges of the neighborhood inward. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this request at their June public hearing and recommended denial by a vote of 7-0. Because this is being forwarded to you with a recommendation of denial from the Planning and Zoning Commission, a 2/3 majority or 6 council members must vote in favor of this request. You also have in your staff report the findings from the Planning and Zoning Commission for your consideration. Based upon concerns that were raised at the July public hearing, the applicant agreed to continue this request to work on some amended conditions to address the concerns, and you have an updated report where there's a cover memo that includes a summary of the changes. The applicant has offered a condition to reduce the development density from 46 to 42 dwelling units, to install a minimum 5-foot-high opaque fence along both sides of the entrance drives, as there were some concerns raised by neighbors about the entrance drive passing next to 2 single-family homes. And they've offered to provide a higher planning standards along the southern boundary where they're abutting single-family dwellings. They've also included a conditional zoning plan that outline where those improvements will be located. Along that entrance drive, that's where they're proposing a 5-foot-high opaque fence. And you see that area that highlighted in green is where they're proposing a higher planting yard rate of the type B planting yard, which would require 8 trees and 25 shrubs every 100 linear feet. This conditional zoning plan is included to depict where those improvements would be installed. Although these updated conditions may mitigate some impact, staff is continuing recommendation of denial, and that promoting redevelopment in this neighborhood from the outer edges inward would be a more appropriate development pattern, and we consider this request premature at this time. That's a brief summary of the updates that are submitted by the applicant. I believe they are here to also provide you some additional comments, but if you have any questions of staff, we're making ourselves available.
Okay. Anybody with questions from staff right now?
Yes, Mr. Shannon, the reduction of the density, was this covered with public hearing? Was this changed? Was this reached out? Was this something that happened in accordance with reaching out to the neighborhood, or was this something that was done by the developer and then forwarded to staff?
This was done by the developer and forwarded to staff.
So in staff's recommendation, the reduction from 46 to 42 is essentially negligible. It doesn't change the dynamics of the development that to a large degree.
That's correct. You still have a situation where you have a multifamily development pretty much surrounded by single-family dwellings.
Anyone else? Questions for staff? Hearing none, thank you.
I got one question. Can you go back to the slide that shows the apartments abutting this property?
Directly to the west or the left of the site, there is an existing multifamily development. As staff had noted in the July public hearing, that is a separate neighborhood. It's not connected. It take their access from Westchester Ridge. But in that abutting neighborhood, it's pretty much all multifamily or townhome development.
So just because it has a separate entrance, you're saying that there's no multifamily around it, even though they share a property line?
They share a property line, but I would note the character of that development off of Chester Ridge Drive is much different from the character of the neighborhood along Futrell Drive, as that is mostly developed with single-family homes.
This is Councilman.
Yeah, go ahead.
Councilman Johnson. Do we know if the developers have met with the neighbors in regards to the change?
I would have the developer, if they're available, to address any contact they've had with the neighbors.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll hear from the applicant about the proposed changes, and Councilman Johnson, I'm pretty sure they can answer your question.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. To answer your question, we were going off of the comments in the public comment section from the last hearing, so we were trying to do something that was a win-win, obviously. Obviously, we were going off the comments from the last open hearing that we had back on July 18th to address the comments. Obviously, we're trying to make a for-profit type residential development. There's only so much we can do from an economic standpoint in order to make it work. So with construction costs as tight as they are, you've heard the problems with the fair housing. That seemed to be a common theme going on. So this is something that helps try to address those types of items. In terms of tonight, we still feel that this is a sound economic decision, a sound decision for the community. It's consistent with the growth and vision statement of High Point. It's consistent with the land use plan, the goals, the objectives, and policies. High Point needs market rate apartments, especially active senior. We outlined that in the previous presentation with High Point University purchasing some property and basically changing it from senior housing to dormitories. We do think that we reflect a best-in-class model for active senior market. We forecast a positive impact on the city's core and the community, and it represents a policy success and a success for the neighborhood. We did go back and re-examine the density. There again, it's a function of economics in terms of what it takes to put this in place. We're not asking for any public funds. We're not coming in here asking for city council. We're not going through community development. This is all privately funded money, so we're not asking for any money for that. We did re-examine the screening to take into account some of the concerns that were expressed in the previous meeting, and we committed to those design updates to address those concerns. We've done all three things that were asked of us in our opinion. We still feel like this is a sound decision based upon the conditional development that we requested in July. The density was reduced by 9% to the 42 units, which is significant. It may not sound significant, but from a revenue standpoint and a cost standpoint, our site costs are still going to be the same, but we're going to get less revenue off of that. We did add the 5-foot opaque fence along both sides to limit the amount of light intrusion to the local neighbors as cars egress and ingress into the property. We did add an additional planting yard, 4 canopy trees, 6 understory trees, and 25 shrubs for every 100 linear feet. That all adds cost to the project with less revenue. And we added this to the conditional zoning plan, and it's illustrated in there. And we did put the enhanced landscaping and fencing in there. So basically, that sums up some of the changes to address some of the concerns that were coming from the July 18th meeting. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Councilman Johnson, you had a question. You want to go ahead and lead off?
Yes. Now, in July, I believe that, of course, you did make some changes. But I would be more inclined to say that I think you should have also met with the neighbors to kind of let them know about the changes, because this is going to actually affect them who live there. And I believe you mentioned that was not done.
Correct.
Okay, and I feel that should have been done. I've been out there to look at it.
Okay.
And I think that to get a win-win situation, I believe you need to include them in that. And I don't think that was done. I see that was not done. So I personally could not vote yes for that, because I think that to have a win-win for you and a win-win for the neighbors, you need to include the neighbors. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Okay.
Yeah, a question. In terms of access, has there been any consideration about additional parcels to expand that? Because we're looking at, 2.8 acres, and that's pretty much maximized the entire area here. That makes it, a very, very tight fit based on what we have here. Has there been any discussions about possibly purchasing, to staff's question about expanding the landmass to be able to make this, a more feasible project?
Previously, before we made the application, we did approach the homeowners, and, it's a resounding no. I have one of the neighbors that every time I speak to them, they basically say, I'm not leaving till I die. So that doesn't really leave a lot of room for negotiating. So we have approached those, and it comes down to economics. And at the end of the day, we have to buy the land at the right price to be able to go through and do the land development, the building, and so forth. And, when you approach those and you're told no, there's only so much you can do with that. At some point in time, I've owned this land for 10 years. I've been working on this for 10 years. And at some point in time, you have to make a decision on what's your plan, and you have to go forward with it. And so at this point in time, we put the plan together. I've spent money, I've invested money for the design, and we've spent money on the rezoning. We've taken the time. We have met with the homeowners, and, unfortunately, the neighbors who don't want this to occur are basically our target demographic. And they would be our target customers moving into this. This is not a North Carolina Home Finance Agency project. I actually went into one that we had worked on previously about a year ago, and quite frankly, there was an unhappy resident. They were unhappy in the tax credit facility, and they literally took a sledgehammer and busted up the entire interior of the property. That's not what this property is. This is targeted for middle, upper income, active seniors who want a place to stay. They don't want to mow the lawn. It's something of that nature. And it's very consistent with the surrounding structures in terms of the target market, the demographic, and what we're offering.
If I'm not mistaken, the last meeting, I think the question was asked that how would you guarantee that this is active senior? And you said you don't take any demographic information when accepting applications?
You have to meet, when you're an active senior, you have to meet certain residential criteria, which is an age-restricted type property. It's a market rate, age-restricted type property.
Mr. Shannon, in terms of the access to the property, this didn't qualify for a traffic impact analysis, correct?
No, it did not qualify.
Any staff concerns about that, about possibly the single access point for the property?
The single access does meet the requirement of the development ordinance. Additional access points would be required if there are more than 50 dwelling units.
Thank you.
Is there a reason why you didn't meet with residents at any point since July?
We originally met with the residents, and we did try to take into consideration their comments at the time. Their comments really haven't changed. They haven't changed since the initial community meeting. They haven't changed since the initial meeting that we had back on July 18th. So we're trying to accommodate the best we can, but at the end of the day, they just don't want it. It's not in my backyard. All of you heard the previous presentation about, this is a nice concept, I like it, but I don't want it in my backyard. And we actually made the presentation in the July 18th meeting about the perceptions of not in my backyard versus the realities of that. And so, the perception I have is that it doesn't matter what we do, it's not going to be good enough. We have spoken with them, we have tried to work with them, but quite frankly, when people come in my office and they make demands on certain things that just aren't realistic, like there were comments in the last meeting of the road's not wide enough. Well, that's not true because we meet the technical requirements. It's gone through technical review. So there are negative comments that are made that just don't reflect the diligence that we put into this project.
So just to get clarification, you said you haven't met with them since July 18th.
Well, prior to July 18th.
You met with them prior to July 18th?
Correct.
Right.
We had a community meeting.
When we met on July 18th, council's sentiment was, hey, is there a compromise here? Can we have more conversations amongst developer and with neighbors? And you're saying you didn't meet with them because you figured they wouldn't change their minds?
Well, that and the timing issue of it. We were under press for time to get to this point.
Help me out. You're saying over 2 months you didn't have enough time to chat with them?
I have 8 different businesses that I run, and there's only a limited amount of time. And I've worked on this for about 3 years, so it's the same comment. So it's quite frankly, it's either time to fish or cut bait. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but I've owned this property for 10 years. Mr. Shannon can attest that I've been working on this for a long time. And at some point in time, I can no longer continue to pay property taxes and do things with this property that could help the community, but I'm having my hands tied behind my back because nobody wants something done in their backyard.
Mr. Dixon's defense, and on that one point, we didn't postpone this to this month so they could have a neighborhood meeting. We postponed it so that him and our planning department could come up with some revisions of some level, whether it was 9% reduction or not. We just said, he just said he wanted some time to make some changes, some buffers and change in density. I wouldn't have had a neighborhood meeting either. That they're not required. We're not part of the process to have a second neighborhood meeting. Leah Terra didn't do that. We approved them, a couple months ago with theirs. So I don't fault them for that. If you're done, I got a question too, if you don't mind. Plan B, if you don't do this, it's currently zoned for what, 3 dwellings?
Four dwelling units.
4 dwelling units on that space, correct?
Pardon?
Total on that space.
Four dwelling units. There are 4 parcels that are together there that we can build on, and they all meet the R3 zoning requirement.
I don't know if it was on the previous presentation or somewhere. Somewhere I have seen a photo of what the other plan was. That was a 2-story building on top of a garage, so essentially a 3-story structure, correct?
Correct, single-family dwellings. And we would probably do a 3-bedroom, because in a 3-bedroom, I can't recall exactly, but, you know, if we build a Section 8, 4 Section 8 homes there, we're guaranteed somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,400 to $1,500 a month.
Right. Now, if you built that, if you were to go with that plan, would they 4 buildings essentially go where this proposed building is going to be
Correct,
on the property?
correct.
And
Currently, there are 4 parcels there, and we would put 1 house on each parcel.
I got you. And the driveway, if you don't get this rezoned and you went with that plan, is it going to move or is it go to the exact same spot?
We have a couple options. We may come in off of Hugh Trail, but we may extend the road where Bridges Drive is to a private driveway.
So this property, I think, is Miss Darby's. Is that the one that's, like, can you go back to that page where it says 1607 Bridges Drive? So go one more forward, I guess where you were showing it.
The site plan.
Site plan, yeah. So right here, just below that green line, that's Miss Darby's property, right?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe.
I mean, I've been there. I went and met with her. I spent a good half hour there talking about her concerns. But whatever decision we make here tonight, you're still putting a building right up against her backyard, whether we.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So that's happening.
And it's probably going to be closer because I don't think I need the setbacks on a single-family dwelling that I would need on a multifamily dwelling.
So in the first scenario, you're going to have housing for 8 to 12 people
Correct,
versus 80-ish.
correct.
So I guess I guess I'm looking at it is we're just being realistic about it. This property is going to be developed into something very similar to this, no matter what. Now, the question is, does High Point get the benefit of solving the housing crisis that we have to the tune of 80 people or 12? So it's something we got to consider, because we do need housing in the city, and developers solve that, not the city. And we're telling him we don't want his business. Something we need to think about.
Anybody else have questions for the applicant?
So in the, as it's currently zoned, there's no height restrictions? Well, I'm sure there's height restrictions, but compared to the 3-story multifamily, you could do a 3-story single family? And there's no setbacks?
Staff has not reviewed the single-family options. What I can note is in the single-family zoning district, the maximum building height is 50 feet. There are setback requirements, but that's going to depend on, you know, they would have to develop a public street, and each lot would have to front on that public street. Whether the side of the house or the rear of the house is facing those properties to the south, that's going to depict their setbacks. But we have not seen a specific plan that we can comment on.
So, I appreciate Councilman Jones kind of providing some clarity here, because most of the boxes that I've heard that people don't like are how close this is going to be to someone's property, how tall it's going to be looking down into someone's window potentially, and the fact that there's going to be a road that comes right close to someone's yard that's going to cut through the property. And everything I'm hearing right now is that the only real key difference is the amount of people. And so that's where it sounds like that's where the hangup is in terms of the amount of people that'll go through there. Am I hearing that in terms of?
Like I said, I haven't seen the specific single-family option, but you're looking at 3 units per acre, 3, maybe 4 single-family detached dwellings, each on an individual lot, versus multifamily up to 42 dwelling units. So there is a difference in intensity of a development.
Yeah, and maybe I'm just asking, I know some council members had the chance to meet with residents, and I know I've read the letters too. And maybe there's a resident who wants to speak to it, and I don't know if we're at that point now, Mayor. But I guess I'm trying to just weigh out the pros and cons on each, because I feel like what I kept hearing was issues with the height of the buildings and the road that's going to go through and setbacks. And it sounds like none of that's mitigated if we say no tonight, it sounds like all of that could still happen the exact same way. And so I'm trying to get some clarity here. If we were just to erase all those arguments, the only thing we're talking about now is how many cars are coming on people's street. I want to make sure I'm hearing that correctly. And if there's a resident who wants to speak to that, I would just love to hear some clarity.
They're going to get a chance to speak. We've had several sign up.
Okay.
And to clarify, and to clarify, we did, part of our conditional zoning was to limit the height. That was part of the original application.
And what's the height on this proposal?
I think we were less than 50 feet. Is that correct, Mr. Shannon?
Either way, Sam.
Yes, the applicant offered a condition for a maximum building height of 50 feet, and the RM16 district allows heights up to 80 feet. So they've restricted the height to 50 feet, which is a maximum height that's permitted in the abutting single-family zone area.
So this plan's 50 feet, your backup plan is still 50 feet.
Correct.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we've had a few folks sign up to speak on this. I'll call you in order. And since this is a continuation of a previous public hearing, I would just ask that you not give us the same presentation you gave us in July. Give us an update on where you are with the proposed changes. First person is Debbie Darby.
Thank you for meeting with us tonight. My name is Debbie Darby. I live at 1813 Futrell Drive. I'm the house that they're pointing to up there with the green line. I'm the one directly affected. And just to go on the record, first thing, I've never been approached with an offer for my property. I've been asked, are you interested in selling? And this is what I have in mind. And what he had on mind was single townhouses building for High Point University graduate students. I was approached with that many years ago. Had I ever been approached with a 3-story apartment complex, of course, it would have been a resounding no. This is my neighborhood, these are my neighbors, and I'm not going to sell them out. Because guess what? Money's not my deciding factor. So, now, for what I was going to say. Okay, my neighbors and I would be willing to work with the developer on a reasonable project. He has not communicated with any of us. Nothing new was included in our latest letter. This was all new to us. We are surprised to learn he's making some small changes since we weren't included or advised. I was here the night the Old Mill Road project was passed. I talked to the residents afterwards, how they got their apartment deleted from their project. And they told them that their developer had several meetings with their concerns in mind and worked with them. And they have 75 acres. Our developer has less than 3 acres. And we weren't even approached. No frontage, he has no street frontage. So essentially, yeah, I have a problem with plowing a road between 2 houses for 40-some apartments plus 2 people going up and down, up and down, up and down. Yeah, it makes a big difference to me, and I'm sure to my neighbors. So if I'm not intimidated, by single-family houses back there, I'm intimidated by a 3-story building crammed full of people back there. That's what I'm intimidated by. And I hate to say it, but we were never approached, Never. Not one single letter, not a phone call, not a walk across the street. My house is directly across the street from his office. We are insignificant to him, insignificant, because I just feel like he has friendships on this board. He feels like he can whip up the votes. We don't count. So the bottom line is that building is out of place. It doesn't fit there. It's like he bought that property and wants the neighborhood to go around him. When you buy a property, you're supposed to fit your project to do what's there, but he wants us to conform to what he wants to build. It's just not right. I do oppose it. I'm hoping that you would also see from our point, and just logic. Logic tells you you don't put a huge building in the middle. It's not on the edge, it's in the middle. Our houses surround this building. That's not even logical. I think if somebody drove up into High Point, they would say, "What the heck is that?" I think we should either do a project that makes sense, or he can sell to somebody who can do a project who makes sense. We're not opposed to development. We're opposed to the development that he is offering us, or basically wanting to cram down our throats. Let us have let us speak. Talk to us. Thank you.
The next person on the list is Richard Bailey.
Good evening, council. I'm not Richard. My name's Tammy Slate. Richard Bailey is going to go right behind me.
Okay.
That it's planned this way.
I got you.
Okay. Good evening, city council members, mayor, everyone present. Thank you for letting us speak on this topic again. It was tabled at the last session. I live right beside Miss Darby, and the road, the access road, is going right beside my house. Literally 10 feet from my home. We did not know anything about fences being put up, bushes being put up. But he's gonna put bushes in the back. That's just gonna pretty up. That's not gonna help separate and keep our privacy to our home and our yard, what we do. All it's gonna do is we're gonna look out our window and it's gonna be pretty bushes. They're gonna look out their windows from 3 stories and they're gonna look in our house and say, oh, they got a new couch. It's not feasible to put the building where he's wanting to put it. The topic that I want to stress tonight is, I did some research. And there are vehicles that will have to access the complex just like anywhere else, not besides normal individual vehicle cars. There's going to be trucks. There's going to be, first of all, the road, the driveway that comes out is straight, comes right in between my home and Miss Cook's home. It straight leads back to the property, and then the property goes off to the side. So the driveway that is straight, that's going to have a 5-foot fence on each side, Futrell Drive is only 18 feet wide. There are no curbs. There's a ditch on both sides. My concern is a fire engine is 10 feet wide. If a fire engine needs to get in there, it needs a turning radius of 20 feet minimum. It can't come out and turn 90 degrees onto Futrell Drive the way that he has this planned. There's no give. Same thing with waste management trucks. They're 8.5 feet wide, require 30 feet turning radius. And a UPS truck, everyone orders stuff, UPS, FedEx, Amazon. is 10 feet wide, requires 29 feet turning radius. It's 18 feet wide on Futrell Drive. There's no way that the vehicles are going to be able to turn in and out of the straight driveway onto Futrell Drive the way that it is proposed right here. It's not. And I would like to say also that, no, we have not been contacted about anything. We did not know any of the updates until we got here this evening. No phone calls, no letters, no. We have known nothing until we got here, and the people that did not come tonight still won't know. I just want that we've had no contact. We would work with him, but what he's wanting to put in that space is not what needs to go in that space. I don't even know if single-family homes need to go in that space due to the way they have to access it, because that is right up beside my home. You are, like Ms. Derby said, you are plowing a driveway through a site that is, say, this wide, and houses have sites this wide. There's no way traffic's going to be able to turn in and out of that driveway safely and not be in the ditch. And believe me, I've seen a lot of them in the ditch. So I just would like everybody to take that into consideration, that it is not a good traffic-wise move to build it that way. And I'm with them when I say I don't want it in my backyard, because that's essentially where it's going to be no matter what he builds. We will be able to look out the window and look right in the window of whoever else. Thank y'all for your consideration this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Slayton. Next person is Richard Bailey.
Good evening, I'm Richard Bailey, 1815 Futrell Drive. The project, good evening, Mayor and the City Councilman. I'm not a good speaker as far as being up in public, but I can talk to you really good by yourself. We've had a couple of City Council members come out and actually speak to us. Take a look at the property, what's being suggested, what's being proposed. If you take a look at the site, it's like what he's proposing to put in. He's trying to put a 2-pound loaf of bread in a 1-pound sack. It ain't working. If you take everybody in the room, got salt and pepper shakers sitting at home on your kitchen table. Everything you got on your kitchen table is about the same size. Don't see any, my house, and most of the houses I go in, I was an Orchid man 15 years. I went in a whole lot of people's houses, probably some of y'all's. And I didn't see any oatmeal container sitting out there on the table with them little bitty short salt and pepper shakers. So what he's proposing is, being that tall of a structure, that's in the backyard, like they keep saying, the backyard, nobody wants it in the backyard. People are people. You don't want it in your backyard, especially a monstrosity of a structure. And like everybody's talking about, it's all surrounded by single-family homes. That's what this was laid out for years ago, single-family homes. And the amount of land that's here, less than 3 acres, like 2.8, you don't have a whole lot of people sitting out here opposing it. Yeah, you still got one contractor like you had for all these other projects that Guilford County has been having to look at. But when you got 70 and 80, 16 acres of land sitting out there, you're going to have a whole lot more people sitting around it that will have a lot more to be able to say about it. So we don't have a whole lot of strength as far as numbers. He don't have a whole lot of land as far as what he's got to try to build on. So taking consideration of what the people actually need, what the people in the community have bought into 70, 40s, 20 years ago. From 20 to 70 years, how long this community has been sitting right here. It's not turned over. Been loyal citizens of High Point. Trying to get this put in their backyard, I'd oppose it. Everybody would oppose it. Even y'all would oppose it in your backyard. So I don't know what else we can do as far as trying to squeeze that onto that property. Like like they said, the land was designed for 4 dwellings, not 40. That's a big difference. Be it, 40 individual, 40 in one structure straight up, or 4 like it's designed for to start with. And that's how it was laid out way long back. I thank y'all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard on this item? Okay, come forward, give us your name and your address. Ma'am, if you'd like to come up too, you can slide in behind her and we'll try to keep it moving. Just give us your name and address for our record.
Martha Stewart, 436 Chester Woods Court. I'm here to tell you that no one has mentioned tonight how Chester off of Chester Ridge, Chester Woods Court. If you look at the plan that shows Chester Woods, there was another shot there that was better than this one, I think. Where the blue lines are, the top of the blue line, 2 segments of it, backs up to Chester Woods Court. Now, the thing about the plan is that there would be the runoff pond would be back at Chester Woods Court. We have no indicator of anything that would be put there that would alleviate our problem of runoff, and it would back right up into the properties that you see there. So that, that is a real consideration for our single-family neighborhood, 39 homes there. And I'm a senior, and my name is Martha Stewart, but I think I got forgotten by the builder there, the developer. But as a senior, I'm not going to go into a landmass that has a 3-story building, pay market rate, with no amenities whatsoever, no play area for grandchildren, visitors, nothing but a cement parking lot, which faces also Chester Woods Court. I want to go somewhere, if I go into an apartment building, that there's amenities, there's a lobby, there's someone there, there's someone taking care of the property, there's a workout room, maybe even a pool if I'm lucky enough. But this, when I started thinking about this back in April when we got our first letter, and by the way, the community meeting is required by the planning department. It's one of the requirements. And so we did say some of the comments that you've heard tonight, and you've heard several times in a different way, because we're all learning a little bit more as we move along. But basically, without being contacted by anybody and with seeing what could happen at Chester Woods Court, we're just like astounded. And the first thing that I ever did was call the planning department, which were so good to me about telling me about the regulations. And one of the statements that was made to me and that I've kept in mind during this whole time is that, does this project fit this landmass? And the answer is no. It's so tight. There's just no room for anything, any amenities whatsoever. So I'm totally against it for Chester Woods Court and for also Few Trail and Bridges. Thank you for your time, City Council, and thank you for the work that you do for our community. I know these issues are tough. They can't be easy. We all just try to get the right words out for how it affects us. And 52% my taxes went up 52% on my property. Am I going to have to look at that? You know, that's going to be, how will I ever sell my property with something like that behind it? Because the woods will be gone, and Chester Woods Court is surrounded by wooded areas. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, good evening. I'm Judy Sidden. I am one of the officers of W. Calvin Reynolds and Associates. We own the 3 condos that back up, that front on Fruit Trail. Since they have gotten so much slower on Eastchester, Fruit Trail has become a speedway. It is 18 feet wide. There are people going 45 miles an hour on that road. You can't get in and out of the driveways. There are 2 driveways to that condominium project, and you can't get out of it sometimes. You slam on the brakes when somebody comes flying around there. And you're talking about putting 55, 42, 44 more cars on that road. It's not going to work. The veterinarian complex is down at the corner of Fruit Trail and Eastchester. Those people don't look out their windows when they come out of the veterinarian. I don't know if they're talking to their dogs and cats or what, but they don't look when they come out of the vet. I've almost got run over I don't know how many times. But since the general public has discovered Fruit Trail, they fly on that road. It's an easy little cutoff to go through there. And I look at it that way. We understand the single family and they don't want these apartments. We don't want the apartments, but we're looking at it as additional people on that 18-foot road that already has too much traffic. So that's our thing. Thank you.
Ms. Sidden.
Good evening, City Council, Mr. Mayor. I'm Nicole Arnold, and I live at 1610 Bridges Drive. Just wanted to say tonight that I appreciate the opportunity to come speak to you again. Was here in July, so I certainly won't repeat what I said then, but you've heard a lot tonight about the residents' concerns. And I do remember at the July meeting that you instructed the developer to meet with the residents, and you've heard that we have not heard from the developer at all during that interim time. In fact, this plan tonight that we're seeing, this is new information. I believe that we called Herb, and he's been wonderful. The city staff have been wonderful to let us know what's going on, but we're finding it out, at the last minute, and we're seeing it for the first time here. We certainly have not seen these plans at all. They haven't been mailed to us. So it's interesting that there are some changes. It would have been great to have those conversations. And one of the things that this body has to deal with and has dealt with very well over this year and in the months that I've been watching what you've been doing, you've had housing concerns come before you. And you've had projects that were on much larger pieces of land, and you've directed the developer to meet with the residents, and they have. And there have been some very, very positive steps made in housing in High Point. And I think that that's because of your responsibility and your direction. And I really appreciate that. We're here tonight because the Planning and Zoning Board decided that this was not a good fit. And they did so unanimously. And then staff also has rejected this development. And they've done so out of their expertise. They haven't done so on a whim. They've done so because the development ordinances say that this is a tricky expedition that's happening here. So I think about Cinderella, her stepsisters. Boy, they had that beautiful glass slipper. And it was expensive and shiny. And it looked like it could work if they just put their mind to it, right? And so their idea was to force it, to shoehorn the issue. And we residents feel that we are being shoehorned. We're being run off. Our concerns are not valid enough to be heard, and that is not how housing policy in High Point is going to be successful. High Point has a housing issue, and that requires serious people to come together and make some consensus. And unfortunately, that's not what's happened here. I appreciate the city councilmen who've come out to look at the land in person. One of the things that I realized living on Bridges is that there was a misconception that my yard is the place that the complex is going to be. This is unfortunate. We keep it mowed, but we haven't been mowing it to put a complex there, an apartment complex there. Rather, when you visit, you will see the non-conforming use lot, the lot that has business property populating it and has for many years. That is the developer's lot. That is the disdain with which he treats your current city ordinances. So all that we can expect as residents moving forward is that the conversation is going to be tempered by that attitude. Construction traffic, water runoff, going into our critical watershed, which my pond, will go into, and then there's a city pond there. These are the types of things that I don't expect happy endings for with what we've experienced thus far. So I ask that you take that into consideration, and I ask that you vote against this project. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. So now the floor is open to the council for discussion or motion.
Got a question for Herb, if that's all right. Herb, one lady brought up an interesting point about fire trucks and their abilities to get back in there and all that. If that were true, would this would have been declined at the TRC level, wouldn't it?
Well, this was a sketch plan that was submitted to TRC to see if the project was feasible. I don't know if transportation has any additional comments, but there were no negative comments regarding access. We have to work with the road that is there, and we felt we did not have enough legal standing to require the developer to widen the road past its front property line. I mean, there are a lot of cases that come forward and will say, you need to widen the road, but in this case, they only have 75 feet of frontage. We didn't feel we had enough legal standing to say you need to widen from Bridges all the way to East Chester Drive.
Who would you consult on that for your legal opinion? Would that go through North Carolina, or would that go through our staff?
That was a planning staff determination. When you have a conditional zoning request and staff is negotiating with the applicants with conditions, there has to be some nexus or direct connection to the conditions that we're recommending in those improvements. A lot of times you'll see conditions for turn lanes or road widening for the amount of frontage that they have. In this situation, a traffic impact analysis was not required, and we did not feel comfortable telling this developer with only 75 feet of frontage, you have to widen a quarter-mile of roadway.
So to be clear, there were no negative comments about access in terms of transportation?
No, they have to meet our access requirements. They have 75 feet of frontage, so they may have to do wider radiuses and so forth to get in. But you can access the site, but I believe the issue that came up is the capacity of Futrell Drive. It meets minimum standards, but it's not optimal.
You mind, I saw where Mr. Venable, our Director of Transportation, was getting ready to say something. Do you mind speaking to it?
Sure. I was just, Herb does a good job of commenting on things that go before TRC. So I was just going to reiterate what he said, that they have to meet, their driveway has to meet standard, and it does have to get reviewed by fire department as well, public services. So it has to meet those requirements and have the ability for the trucks to access that property and get back to that building. So it does meet our requirements.
Public services as well?
They have to review it. As Herb said, I think there were no negative comments on their access as well. So they would have to approve it as also when it comes through TRC.
So no issues in terms of access from public, emergency, any of that?
Not that I'm aware of, no. I think everything was fine.
Mr. Mayor, if I could ask a follow-up question, and I also know Councilman Jones, were you done?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm looking at the recommendation / action requested going back to Planning and Zoning Commission's meeting, noting it was voted down, but looking at the reasons, it was saying that the requested zoning map amendment to CZRM 16, they're saying that doesn't actually conflict with the adopted land use policy. So there's no land use issues. It's just saying, however, the policy does assume an assemblage of land to form a larger development and the improvement of abutting streets I guess getting clarity on those two things in terms of where that piece assumes, again, assemblage of land and improvement of abutting streets. Does that assemblage of land, is there a threshold that we're looking at here? I think I saw something in here that said 3 acres. Is that 2.9? Are we saying in terms of assemblage, if it was like 0.1? I'm trying to get clarity here.
What staff is recommending, and I don't know if they have the mouse up here. This is a tight site. What the policy recommends is assemblage to land to have a larger development area. That is why we note in the staff report that we felt the request is premature. We're not in opposition to multifamily in this area, but the policy for this area is looking at assembling tracts to form a larger tract of land. So either assembling tracts along East Chester and develop from the outward inward, or from Bridges Drive, which is north of the site, to the western boundary site, assembling that for a larger area. That will give you more frontage. That gives us an ability to tie in road improvements for our widening Future Trail Drive from Bridges southward. That gives you a situation where you're not totally surrounded by single family and you have more room to address compatibility issues. As currently submitted, this is just a tight site and staff could not support it at this time.
So it's not necessarily an acreage threshold. I think it's what you said. If it would have started at the edge of this development, like near East Chester, and then moved in, is that where you're kind of saying a assemblage of land? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that assemblage could offer an ability to ensure some compatibility, and also with more assemblage of land, you have more road frontage. Then staff would have a higher comfort level in coming before you saying, hey, along with this request, road improvements or widening should be looked at along the entire site frontage. We just weren't comfortable saying to this developer, you need to widen Future Trail from Bridges to East Chester when you only have 75 feet of frontage, trying to make that legal tie-in. We felt more comfortable, as we've done on other cases, either it hit a threshold where traffic impact analysis is required, they meet with the Transportation Department, they look at the surrounding roadway network and figure out where improvements are needed, or do improvements along the total street frontage. We just didn't have that situation here.
So and forgive me, y'all know I got a lot of questions. I'm really so new and learning so much about this, Mr. Shannon. I appreciate your patience. So you're saying staff would have preferred more frontage, so then we could have asked for street widening? Is that what you're saying?
If the site had more street frontage, we would look at some street widening and improvement there as a zoning condition. But with more frontage, more land assemblage, you eliminate a situation where this site is surrounded by single family. Also with more land area, if there are any compatibility issues, that gives you more room to work on your site as far as buffering, moving buildings away and so forth. With this site, the applicant doesn't have a lot of flexibility at, well, I'm going to put the building here, or I can shift buildings over here. I can put a larger buffer area here. It's just not a large enough piece of property to offer that opportunity to move buildings around to try and mitigate impact.
Okay. And then in terms of the improvement of abutting streets, I feel like it's been discussed at least at one point, but Bridges has the potential, at least it looks like, ostensibly, I don't know exactly how feasible it is, for there to be a second sort of egress there on that property. Has that been looked at, Mr. Dickerson, by your group?
We did look at that, and as I referenced in the July meeting, the reason we put the building where it's located is the driveway where Mr. and Mrs. Arnold are located. They can't get out of their driveway if we were to go and change that area. So we tried to take into consideration their egress to not interrupt how they come out of their driveway. And that's the reason we were using the, pardon?
Incorrect.
That's not incorrect. If you take a look at the survey, you have to cross our property to get out. Okay.
We're not going to argue back and forth.
That's the reason we put the building the way it was. We actually had another design where the building was going to be on the opposite side where the driveway and the parking lot shown, but we were concerned because of the open space that they had there, it could become a conflict. So we wanted to pull that over to the other side of the property, have our access come in there, and then that way we could make sure that we weren't affecting the neighbors in that way.
So essentially, the project as it stated is either so tight that it will block egress of current neighbors or not allow entrance from Eastchester?
Well, just to be clear, whenever you develop property, you want to maximize the density, because there are certain economies of scale that you have to achieve in order to make the economic model work, okay? You know, right now, if you go out, like we were talking about, like 75 acres, if you take a look at where you're at in developing 75 acres, we're going to have to put a lift station on this property. We have to run an 8-inch water main from 68 back to this property. That all costs money, and that's allocated into the number of units. So when you take that into consideration, there are a lot of economic factors that you have to plug into this. And when you start doing the math, it becomes a law of diminishing returns, and at some point in time, guess what? We just have to say, okay, well, we're not going to do this. If we don't get at least 40 units, then we'll put the 4 houses out there, because I can make those numbers work. I don't have to spend money on expensive lift stations, driveways, and so forth. So, and it's already zoned for that. So I'm going to get a return on investment on something there. I've already made the purchase. I've already invested the money. We're trying to work with the neighbors, but it's crystal clear. As you can see, the anger that's coming towards me, because, you know, in our first meeting, they don't want it. And I appreciate that. We've tried to work with them. We've tried to design something that works for the neighborhood. We do have apartments behind this. But at the end of the day, you know, when, you know, Miss Darby talked about her dad's American dream. Well, this is my American dream, and this is what I'm going after, okay? And I'm asking for your all's help to make it happen. I'm not asking for money. I took into consideration from the get-go that we wanted to make sure we had a positive impact with this particular property. And that's why we went with, we didn't go market rate, because we didn't want students coming and living in this. We wanted an active senior over 55 to make sure it remained a quiet community. And that's the reason we chose this. And we did, you know, I've probably got 5 or 6 different layouts that we've toyed around with to make this work the way we need it to accommodate the requests that we received.
When did you buy this property?
Best I can recall is May of 2012.
Was it owned by any of the neighbors here?
I believe it was owned by either directly by Mr. and Mrs. Arnold or through one of their companies.
Okay. And you initially bought it. Were you a developer then?
Yeah, we worked on construction and real estate at the time.
When you bought it, did you foresee this floor plan, or were you considering single family back then, or it's always been this?
I've actually worked on layouts with the two other parcels beside of Miss Darby's, and you know, I've had conversations with Miss Darby that, you know, she worked for US Air, and she said she wanted to retire and move to Charlotte so she could go see her daughter in Chicago. And I told her, I said, if you want to sell it, please contact me. But that didn't occur, and I don't think she's going to be moving anytime soon. So, you know, when council comes out, or when staff comes out and recommends an assemblage of parcels, that automatically inflates the price. It makes it much more difficult to make the economic model work, because then, quite frankly, I've kind of got one arm tied behind my back at that point. And so when you come out with that kind of recommendation, it makes it extraordinarily difficult. And you know, quite frankly, we work in a lot of different places. I'm licensed in 5 different states. And this has been one of the more difficult rezoning cases that I've worked with. And we work on similar type projects. We're not a developer that goes in and buys 20 acres to develop 300 apartments. We like going in and finding smaller parcels that are underutilized, so that way we can put something in place to make the community better and make it work.
When did this particular proposal come to planning and zoning? How long has this been before planning and zoning?
I believe we went to the Planning and Zoning Commission at the June public hearing meeting.
So over the course of you owning this project, how many different projects have you proposed to the city for development of this land?
Honestly, I've made several proposals with Mr. Shannon, and we've worked together for.
And the reason I'm asking these questions is because if we look at the time that you've had this and proposals that have come before, at some point, I don't think the tenets of this particular project would have, considering the land use plan and what this project offers, you would have, planning and zoning would have made a different recommendation anytime prior to this. Am I correct?
I would just note, staff has met with the applicant several times with different proposals. That's not unusual. We'll do that all the time. This is the first proposal, I believe, since 2000 that's actually proceeded through the public hearing process. So yes, we have met with the applicant and gone over multiple options, but at least since 2000, this is the only option that's went forward through the full-blown public hearing process.
So at any point in time, you probably were aware that any development here, especially multifamily, would have run up against the same constraints of land mass.
Yes, but it does meet the conditional zoning requirements. It meets the technical elements to go forward. And we've addressed any issues with staff but it's about policy here. It's not necessarily about the land use. You know, previously, when I first bought this was zoned for commercial use. It was not even zoned for residential because it had been assembled and rezoned, I believe, in 2000. And so since then, the zoning map has changed. We've worked with that. I wanted to do some other things with it. Mr. Shannon and I have worked together to try to come up with a win-win situation. And at some point in time, as an investor, I have to move forward with a plan and present that and show, come up with something that we try to come up with a win-win scenario. And I believe we've done that. It met with a lot of resistance, as you can see in the initial meeting. I mean, it was crystal clear to me that it's not wanted. We don't want this. I think it was clear in the July meeting. I didn't feel, the reason we didn't have another meeting was I've been attacked in council and in planning about just not wanting the property. There's been some misinformation conveyed in these meetings because we have met the technical requirements to make it work. Like the road's too small. We don't have turning radius. They've all been addressed. You've heard all of that. And so we tried, at some point in time, we have to come up with the best win-win scenario. And the best win-win scenario is an active senior because it does. You can see who's in this room today. That is our target demographic, is over 55. I'm part of it. And the alternative is we go in and we put some single-family housing there that may or may not be a Section 8 housing because, obviously from some of the stuff you've heard earlier today, there is a housing problem for low income. So that is an option here. So the option, that would be a very easy option for us to go in and put some low income housing, put 4 houses there and rent those because we have a need in High Point. You've heard that today. So that's an alternative and if we get rejected today, that might be what we do.
I have a question for staff. Actually, 3 of you, Herb, Venables, and Reed, because the most concerning thing to me would be if a fire truck would not be able to make that turn. And I don't know in planning and zoning if y'all have talked about being able to use an access. I kind of understood what Mr. Dickinson was saying about not in that back area where Bridgers enters that area. I mean, is there any way that you could have 2 access points into that lot? Has that been decided? And will the fire truck be able to make that turn?
I'll let Chief Reed discuss the fire truck and access. The development ordinance would only require 1 access point. Unless there is a zoning condition offered by the applicant to require 2 access points, we would not be able to make the applicant put in a second access point.
So if I'm understand you right, obviously you want to know about turning radiuses and so forth, but all that stuff's addressed at TRC, but there's state codes, fire codes, as well as the city ordinances that dictate what radiuses have to be and so forth to allow access, not just for fire truck, but any type of service truck that the city has to provide. So all that is met on the final thing before you can get approval. So it's with any development. That's why cul-de-sacs and T intersections and so forth have to meet certain standards, but there is standards out there. And I think you said this is on the preliminary
Yeah, so
sketch now.
just so you guys are aware, like Mr. Shannon had said, this is they submitted a sketch plan, so nothing's been officially approved, and it won't be until this zoning goes through. So they're still in the process of review, so comments still need to be made, and approval still needs to be granted for that, for those plans.
So then what happens, hold on, because that was a good point right there. So we approved the zoning, and you're saying that then you all would have to go like really, really look at it a lot more closely. And
We're
then,
not approving the actual sketch plan that's here, we're just being asked to approve the zoning.
right, so what I'm saying is if we approve the zoning, and then they look at it and the sketch plan just does not work, then the fear is abated because either something's getting fixed or they're not doing it, it sounds like. It sounds like right now zoning doesn't absolutely put a road right there. Zoning allows them to even see if a road can go right there.
Just to clarify, staff always encourages applicants to bring forward a sketch plan prior to rezoning, just to see if there are any issues being missed. Can the project work? When an applicant submits that, that is not full-blown hard engineering. It's a very schematic type situation. What our technical review committee took a look at was just a sketch plan. The hard engineering has not been done. TRC will not approve a plan that doesn't meet our standards. So what you have before you here is just a concept plan, and no major red flags were identified. If it is approved, then the applicant have to go through and do the hard engineering, confirm turning radiuses, and meet all standards of the development ordinance.
Yeah, so the way I'm hearing it now, thank you, because that was good information, because I was kind of under the impression, the way folks were talking tonight, that if we approved the zoning, that a road was just going to automatically go in, and then we were faced with being the ones responsible for a fire truck not getting down the road. But it sounds like we get to approve zoning, then the folks who actually know the stuff, not us, they get to go look and then tell you if a road can go in or not, and if you need to widen it and all that other good stuff. So really the fear of a truck going off the side of the road, that's not the decision we're making tonight. That's for someone else to make that decision because they're the experts. Our decision is to decide if we want more housing or not. That's kind of the way I heard it, and I could be wrong. Someone give me clarity. But it sounds like what I just heard is we're not approving a road. We're approving zoning. Yeah. And the experts are going to approve a road. So we're not deciding tonight if a truck's going to fall off the side of the road. We're just deciding if housing should go there. Yeah. Do I have it clear?
If I made it. We're also deciding density.
Density, right. No. Listen, density I get, but I feel like I kept hearing about trucks on the side of the road, and I was like, dear God, I don't want to be responsible for that tonight. But that's not my fault.
Nope. We're just deciding zoning.
If I may to help clarify that, you are deciding land use policy for this area. Based upon your adopted land use plan, your quarter plan, all those plans that we bring forward to you, you're setting policy for land use for this area. Staff has put forward a recommendation that we felt it doesn't meet the policy, but ultimately, council makes the decision, and from that decision, you set future ongoing policy. So what you're looking at is this an appropriate location for this size property, the scale, bulk, and mass of development that's being proposed for this site. Is that appropriate, yes or no? And whichever decisions you make, then that's the policy staff will look at for this area going forward.
Yeah, no, thank you for the clarity. I gotta say, just by listening tonight, and I'm not, I've heard a lot, and admittedly, I'll tell you, Mr. Dickinson, I wasn't hot coming in tonight to find out you didn't have a community meeting, but I hear what you're saying in terms of disdain and kind of where that is. I probably still just wasn't a fan of you not even if it wasn't a community meeting, chatting with residents again and just having those kinds of conversations. I do think that's important. But I have to say, on the merits of the project, I think, again, going back to all the sort of boxes I kept hearing was, it's going to be tall buildings, and there's, we don't like the setback, and there's going to be roads that people can't drive down. I feel like I kept hearing that, And right now, all of that is like mitigated at this point. All of that's not even the issue. The issue is, do you want more people in your neighborhood or not? And that's what I hear. And I get it, you're right, in terms of density, do you want 12 more people or do you want 30-something more people? I get that. But I was trying to get clear on the boxes, and it just sounds like the boxes just aren't checking.
It mitigates it to this project that's outlined right here, but it doesn't do anything to address the streets that get you to that.
Yeah, but what I heard is, again, when we approved the zoning, we're not
To
absolutely
that
saying the
specific
road.
property that we're looking at.
Yeah, we're just looking at the property. Like, we can approve zoning, and our staff, who are very good at what they do, will look at the roads and will tell us, and will tell Mr. Dickerson, hey, you can't do it because the roads just don't work. And then we're fine. Like, we don't have that problem. He either fixes the roads or the project doesn't get done. But I think right now, it almost felt like we were, again, it felt like we were being asked to make a decision about, is the road too small? Or we were being asked to make a decision about, can fire trucks get back there? We were asked to make a decision about setbacks and about heights. And every single one of those things I kept hearing, it just sounds like that's all mitigated. It sounds like the only thing we're making a decision about is density and how many people are there. It's not about how close buildings are to buildings, because he could build a single family and it's still just as close. He could build a single family and still just as tall. He could build a single family and still put a road back there and the same issues are there. But it's just, I hear, it's just, I don't see the issues being mitigated by us saying no to zoning tonight. And I don't see us signing some bad decision in terms of roads by tonight if we approve a zoning. I think staff could do that.
Well, and as he said, it will set the precedent for the area going forward.
Jefferson, I was just going to say one more reminder that if the zoning is changed tonight and for some reason this sketch plan or this plan does not work after going through TRC, the zoning for that property will remain changed. So the zoning for that site will always be changed depending on the decision that y'all make tonight. So I just wanted to make that point of clarification.
But somebody could still, I think I know the answer, but somebody could still put single family in that zoning. You just can't put multifamily in the current.
Correct, but it will be zoned for up to the density. Exactly, you can go down, but you can't go back.
So we're given the option for him to have some flexibility, quite frankly. Because ultimately TRC is gonna decide up or down if a road can go there. So our job is to decide, are we giving some density flexibility? TRC decides, do the roads work? If it doesn't work, they get flexible and get creative and we find something that does work. But ultimately, we don't have to decide, again, about road widths. Like, that's not our job.
Right, then the zoning will stay with it.
Yeah, I guess the question would be to the developer, if you are required to widen the road, is that a cost you're willing to undertake?
If it comes back on a road widening, that's an economic decision that we'd have to make going forward. I mean, right now, I don't have an answer for that because I don't know what the cost will be because we haven't analyzed it.
And if you can't justify the road widening, you'd probably still default back to the 3 or 4 single families.
Or I could always come back to council and ask for some development money and see if you'd be willing to grant me some community development funds or something.
Yeah, I hear you, but I mean, still, if TRC tells you got to pay out of your own pocket to widen that road and you put it in your pro forma and you find out that kills the profitability of the project, you would probably still divert back to single family.
Correct.
I think we're going to talk about this all night. Yeah.
Can I make a motion to deny this?
Okay. There's a motion on the floor to deny. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to deny. Is there any comments or questions on the motion? Okay. All those in favor of a motion to deny, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Okay. That motion passes and the project is denied.
Mr. Mayor, you would have to note the consistency statement that's in the staff report.
Your motion tags that along. Give it to me to read.
I think you can just
Please include the consistency.
Include it.
With the motion.
Yep. Okay. All right. Next case is Plan Amendment 22-03. Again, if you're leaving, please do so quietly. Do your talking in the hall.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Andy Piper, Senior Planner with the City of High Point Planning and Development Department. This is going to be a joint presentation of Land Use Plan Amendment Case 22-03 and Zoning Map Amendment Case 22-19. I'll give an overview of the Land Use Plan Amendment, and then Herb Shannon will follow with a presentation of the rezoning request. However, the two items will need to be voted on separately.
All right.
To orient everyone to the location, the site is approximately 20 acres along the west side of NC 68 or Eastchester between Penny Road and Premier Drive. It's a former agricultural property still under Guilford County's jurisdiction that also includes 2 single-family detached homes on separate parcels. Looking at the surrounding uses, immediately to the south are 3 restaurants and a dentist office. To the east, across NC 68, are various commercial uses in the Shops at Deep River and Palladium shopping centers. To the north, on the other side of a stream, is an office building, and to the west, an undeveloped parcel, both within the Premier Center Business Park. As you can see on the map that is before you, most of the site has a restricted industrial. That's the kind of purple color land use classification. And this reflects the intent expressed in the Land Use Plan and Eastchester Corridor Plan dating back to the early 1990s, which saw that the northern portion of NC 68 corridor would develop with offices and warehouse distribution facilities, along with some light manufacturing. However, these plans also recommended limiting commercial uses to major intersections, including at NC 68 and Windover Avenue. As that commercial node expanded, approximately 13 acres at the northwest corner of NC 68 and Penny Road, including the 2.7 acres on the site tonight, were amended to a community regional commercial designation in 2015. So you have a mix of restricted industrial as well as some commercial land use designation there. The applicant is requesting a change to a medium-density residential classification to accommodate a proposed multifamily apartment complex with a density of approximately 14 dwelling units per acre, which falls within the 8 to 16 dwelling units per acre range for this land use classification. Looking at the surrounding development pattern, the consolidation of commercial uses in the area has spurred higher density residential development around its edges. This is evident by looking again at the map of the medium-density residential designations, which is kind of the brown color here you see kind of around the edges, and I don't have a pointer, but you can see kind of basically on all sides, as well as the northern portion of that mixed-use development, which is the Palladium, also has multifamily as well. The request is also supported by several goals and objectives in the Community Growth Vision Statement and the Land Use Plan. This includes encouraging higher density residential densities at appropriate locations to provide housing options, particularly in mixed-use areas like this one that allow for a concentration of activity and a more efficient use of land. Having a multifamily residential use on the periphery also arguably establishes an edge for this larger commercial node, and a transition between the more intense uses to the south and the more office uses to the north. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the request because it meets several goals and objectives of the Community Growth Vision Statement and Land Use Plan and will be in harmony with the land use pattern of the surrounding area. The Planning and Zoning Commission also recommended approval of the request by a vote of 8-0 at their August meeting. And before I turn it over to Mr. Shannon to present the rezoning request, I'm happy to answer any questions about the land use plan amendment.
It seems, how did this whole end up in this situation? It seems inconsistent with the rest of the zoning.
Right, so it's still under the Guilford County jurisdiction. Okay. So it's a former farm. I don't believe it's active anymore, but it's not been under the city's jurisdiction, essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a whole, yeah.
So, thank you.
The next two items related to this case is the annexation and rezoning request. And Councilmember Holmes, to answer your question, this is the annexation map. Basically, this site is surrounded by the city of High Point, and this is the last parcel in this area to be annexed. This is still agriculturally zoned within Guilford County. The applicant's requesting annexation to have access to city utilities. This request for annexation is a logical progression of the city's annexation policy for this area, as the site is completely surrounded by the city of High Point, and city utilities and service vehicles are already in this area, so annexation of this property would not negatively impact the city's ability to provide services. In regards to the zoning request, the applicant is requesting rezoning to a conditional zoning RM16 district to support development of a multifamily development. They've offered a conditional zoning request that has conditions pertaining to permitted uses. They've offered a conditional zoning plan depicting the proposed layout of the site. They've also offered conditions pertaining to the overlay district standards, parking and vehicle circulation and access. This site fronts along East Chester Drive and the NC 68 corridor, which is an extremely important corridor within the city of High Point. There is an established corridor plan that runs along the entire length of NC 68 from North Main Street to the northern city limits. And there are key objectives and policies of the corridor plan, specifically minimizing traffic congestion caused by haphazard commercial development, limiting commercial development to well-separated nodes. There are three major commercial nodes along the corridor, along the southern part from Main Street to Lassiter. This is at the midpoint of that commercial node at the Windovers, Key Club Road, Penny Road intersections, and at northern limits of the city at Gallimore Dairy Road. The requested rezoning to support higher density multifamily use is consistent with the manner in which development has occurred along the edge of this commercial node. This area in red kind of outlines the limits of that node, and there are several multifamily developments that have developed in the past along the edge of this commercial corridor. You have the Hybrook Apartment, Allerton Ridge, Admiral Point commercial multifamily development to the south, in the Copperville Mill Village multifamily development. To the west, adjacent to the site, is a Deep River Points multifamily development. There's also the Alexandra Park multifamily development. At the northern edge of this commercial node is the Palladium multifamily development. And as you recall, late last year, you had the proposal for Palladium South at the southeast corner of Penny and Wendover, and part of that commercial development had a proposal for a buffer area for a multifamily development that will separate the commercial from the abutting single-family neighborhood. So this request is a continuation of the development pattern of having higher intensity multifamily development along the outer edges of this existing commercial node. Key issues to note from the staff report as far as compatibility: the request support for a medium density residential would not negatively impact adjacent uses. It would just further enhance this as a live, work, entertainment mixed use area. This is the aerial of the area, so you can see directly across the street, you have the Palladium development, and to the south, you can see where their office and existing Deep River Point multifamily development. The applicant has also included a binding conditional zoning plan that notes the layout of the site, where they have the buildings closer to the road frontage with landscaping so that parking is toward the interior of the site. That is a key policy objective of the East Chester Corridor Plan. And they've also included with their conditional zoning plan elevation standards that no matter whether they develop the site or it's sold to another developer, the conditions run with the land, so those higher standards are in place. And they've included this elevation, color elevation rendering to note how the proposed conditions as far as internal parking, higher design standards will enhance the existing high quality development being sought along the East Chester corridor. Thus, staff is recommending approval of this request, and you have in your staff report a recommendation of approval from staff, a recommendation of approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and you have the consistency statement and reasonableness statement from the Planning and Zoning Commission for your consideration. Are there any questions regarding the plan amendment, annexation, or zoning requests from staff at this time?
Yeah, this may sound silly, but that, on the annexation case, that little piece of Highway 68, would that stay in the county? There's nothing there. I'm just wondering.
It will stay in the county. I believe in 2011, the General Assembly changed up the manner in which we can do annexations. We used to be able to do the right-of-way.
Yeah.
No longer we can't. That is a project staff will probably bring forward to you in a few years where we gather up all these little right-of-ways. We'll work with the Transportation Department, confirm with NCDOT they have no objection with the city taking over that. But the way the state legislators have adopted the general statutes, we cannot annex that right-of-way unless the deed includes all that land area.
I got you. Okay, just wondering. Just wondering. All right. Anybody have questions for staff? Okay, thank you, Mr. Shannon. All right, so next, public hearing is open. We'll hear from the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members of the council. My name is Amanda Hodier, and my offices are at 804 Green Valley Road in Greensboro. And I'm here tonight on behalf of the contract purchaser applicant, which is Evolve Companies. I have with me here tonight Mr. Frank Ford and John McDonald, who are both principals at Evolve and handling the project management for this. So here as needed if you have any operational questions. I do have a couple of exhibits I wanted to pass up just for points of emphasis. Your staff has done a great job hitting everything that I was going to say, so I think I can keep this pretty brief, but just wanted to emphasize a few things, and these are follow along with those points. So as he's passing those out, I'll go ahead and note a couple of things. I think you touched on this, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Shannon clarified what I was going to say, which is regarding the annexation. As you all, I'm sure, are aware, under current state law, cities cannot go out and do involuntary annexations anymore. So in a situation like this, where you do have an inconsistent donut hole, as it were, the developer or property owner coming forward and requesting, voluntarily asking for annexation is the only way to cure those items. So we are pleased and excited to be able to bring y'all that opportunity tonight and clear up that little donut hole issue along with our intended development. So just working our way through the handout here, the first point is location, 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 of course. This is a real estate matter, of course. So this makes sense for a lot of reasons, both as a rezoning and as a land use plan amendment, because this is just a very ideal multifamily location. It's location along a major corridor with easy access to that corridor to go anywhere in High Point, and then to get to the major transportation corridors to go anywhere beyond High Point is a key of this request. Also, the fact that it does situate within High Point very well. As you heard from your staff, it's a supporting use to what you've got going on to the north in terms of the well-established employment center there and the employers that are located there, and to the south in terms of a very attractive and destination draw commercial node that you have with Palladium and the other uses surrounding Palladium. This is a place people want to live and be close to for the live, work, entertainment options that you heard about from your staff. So we appreciate staff's approach to the land use plan amendment in that regard, to infuse those other land uses with this supporting use of residential in that area. Not only does it infuse and help those two nodes thrive, it also creates a nice transition, a nice step down between those uses, as you've heard from staff. And that's exactly what you see on the next two maps of emphasis. Mr. Piper went over the land use plan map very well, so we don't need to belabor that. The map here that Mr. Shannon created showing the commercial node in red and then all the multifamily flanking that node is a great exhibit that I would have created myself had he not already put it in y'all's packet. So again, this request is right in keeping with that policy that is well established and well precedented here in High Point. The next point in my handout is our TRC approved binding site plan. And this just exhibits, basically the journey we've taken with staff to come up with the best possible manifestation of the highest and best land use here, which we believe is this multifamily, and which I would say that your staff supports and your planning board staff supported unanimously. So again, you're just seeing the manifestation here of all your Eastchester corridor policies and your TRC's diligence in making sure we have the best iteration of all your rigorous development standards. And next is the building elevations that came in with this request that Mr. Shannon covered. And then the last a couple of handouts is just our 2-page letter that we sent out for community outreach. This was sent to all of our adjacent neighbors within our notification range, inviting them to attend a neighborhood Zoom meeting with us. We did have that meeting, but we had no one attend. It also includes my personal contact information in case anyone wanted to reach out privately or in case they couldn't make a meeting, but I never received any communication from anyone, and my understanding from Mr. Shannon is that he did not either. So I believe that is a further reflection of how this fits into the area. So I will leave it there for questions, but I appreciate staff's diligence on this, planning board's support, and hope that we have your support tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody have questions for applicant at this point? No? Okay, public hearing is open. If there's anyone else who would like to speak on this matter, for or against, now's your opportunity. Okay, hearing no one, I will close the public hearing. And I'll make a motion to approve plan amendment case 22-03. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by the Mayor Pro Tem. Any comments or clarifications, questions on this? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Next is the annexation case 22-05. I'll move for approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval of this item. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Zoning map amendment 22-19, I'll make a motion for approval, and I'll adopt the reasonableness and consistency statement as provided by staff. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. There's a motion and then a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next case is zoning map amendment 22-20.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is a continuation of the city comprehensive zoning map amendment project where we're systematically going through the city, looking at areas to see if the zoning is in line with the land use policy. And there are 2 areas we're bringing forward to you today, 146 acres located north of East Martin Luther King Jr. Drive along Avondale and Spring Garden Circle and along North Pendleton Street. I would note early notices were sent out to the property owners at the beginning of this year, and our regular public hearing notices went out as usual. For any members of the public who are here, there's no new development associated with this. This is just a cleanup of the zoning for this area. For Area A, that area was rezoned in 2000 for sports and counseling and rehabilitative center, and that area, that CUHI, was for heavy equipment repair. That project never came to fruition. In 2006, the mid portion of that area that was all institutional was zoned to conditional use R5. That never came to fruition. So you have a proposal to rezone a CULI or CUHI to LI. The land use plan has that area along Avondale adjacent to this for light industrial. There are light industrial uses already in that area. So since that heavy equipment repair never happened and it's been 20 years, we're recommending cleaning up the zoning to match the manner in which the surrounding area has developed in the land use plan. For that area, that's CUR5. With the update of the development ordinance in 2017, a lot of the conditions that were proposed for that residential development, which never happened, are now governed by the development ordinance, so you don't need those conditions. And rezoning this area to R5 will make it easier for any future redevelopment, and also will make the zoning consistent with the land use plan for this area, so you wouldn't have those 2 separated areas of institutional in the middle of this single-family neighborhood. The second area that's being considered is along Pendleton Street. This is part of the Kivett Industrial Park. That park was rezoned to a HI zoning district in 1984 under the 1980 version of the development ordinance. Since then, there have been 3 major rewrites to the development ordinance. The land use plan now classifies this area for light industrial, and the manner in which this area developed has been of a light industrial nature. With the rewrite of the development ordinance, HI is reserved for more noxious uses such as asphalt plants, hazardous waste, and landfills, What has developed out there are larger industrial uses with all the uses inside, which fits perfectly under the LI zoning district. Along the west side, you have the Pendleton is the Polo facility. Staff is recommending that front part to be rezoned from CULI to LI. The rear part, there were specific conditions regarding building setbacks, higher landscaping, and access restrictions that the neighbors requested at the time that rezoning was in place. So as to ensure that compatibility in case the site's ever reused, staff is recommending the CZLI for the western part of the site stay in place to continue to protect those neighborhoods along Cedro Drive. So in conclusion, staff is recommending approval of the rezoning of Area A from CUHI and CU institutional and conditional use R5s. The HI area would just be light industrial, the rest will be R5. And for the land off of Pendleton, we're recommending rezoning from conditional use heavy industrial and conditional use light industrial to light industrial. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this request at their August public hearing and recommended approval. And you do have the consistency statement from the commission for your consideration. Are there any questions of staff regarding this proposal?
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Shannon. Public hearing is open. Is there anyone here to speak on this item? For or against? Okay, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and make a motion for approval of zoning map amendment 22-20, and I'll adopt the consistency and reasonableness statement as stated in the staff report.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? And that motion passes unanimously. All right, are the next 4 cases all related to the airport overlay?
Yes, they are.
Okay, all right. Just clarifying. All right.
Mayor and Council, Heidi Galante from the Planning and Development Department. This is going to be a joint presentation between myself and Chris Andrews, and there are 4 items. It is the Airport Overlay District Land Use Policy Evaluation, a zoning map amendment 22-21, plan amendment 22-04, and text amendment 2203. First up is the airport evaluation. I will say that while we're presenting all of this at one time, they will need to be voted on separately at the end. Again, a little bit of background on this. As you may recall, staff conducted an assessment of the airport's Part 150 study a little over a year ago. The Part 150 is an important noise compatibility study. It is a voluntary, federally funded program that helps airports find ways to reduce non-compatible land uses by analyzing current and future airport use. It is done about every 10 years based on need. The last one was done in 2007 and approved in 2008. The current Part 150 study was started in 2019 and was approved in April of this year. Staff recommendations from the assessment that was given in July of 21 were to amend the airport overlay district in 8 areas known as A through H, to do a text amendment, and to do a land use plan evaluation. This presentation is of the land use policy evaluation, which is available in your packet and has been available on our website. First off, the evaluation purpose was to evaluate the impact of the district changes on adopted policy, areas A through H, to ensure clarity on land use policy and determine if land use policy changes are needed. The map shows the current land use plan underneath the Airport Overlay District proposed changes, which shows that the restricted industrial shown in light purple is up closest to the airport, and that is to allow for growth of jobs and industry up in proximity to the airport and adjacent to I-40. The study area for the evaluation is just under 12,000 acres. It's about 50% inside the city and 50% outside the city. And remember that the airport overlay is only applicable when property is annexed into the city limits. The existing applicable planning documents that were reviewed as part of this evaluation were the land use plan, the Northwest Area Plan, and the East Chester Corridor Plan. Other policies considered during the evaluation were the water and sewer extension policy, which requires annexation to get water and sewer, and the relevant annexation agreements for this evaluation, which are our annexation agreements with Kernersville and Greensboro. They help determine our growth boundary, and they also send a clear message to the development community about who to contact when they are looking to develop an area.
I asked for clarification. I'm sorry, I just learned something new. This does not go into effect when there is rezoning, only annexation.
When you annex into the city, the airport overlay is automatically applied to that land. But if it is outside the city, it is not applicable. It's governed by Guilford County.
And when rezoned, rezoning doesn't change.
Well, when we rezone, we require annexation because usually you're rezoning to develop and getting water and sewer. So that's why zoning and annexation typically run hand in hand. Good question. So that's okay. Staff conducted an analysis of existing conditions as part of this. Not going to go into a great level of detail on them, but just going to hit the highlights. All maps and details of the analysis are included in the document, and the highlights that I'm about to give you are based on the proposed airport overlay boundaries, not on the current. So we looked at the land use plan, and the top two land use classifications were restricted industrial at 50% and low density residential at 30%. Again, supporting the restricted industrial 50%, supporting area for industrial growth adjacent to the airport. Existing land uses were 37% residential, 24% undeveloped, 13% agricultural, and 11% industrial. Existing city zoning is 38% industrial, that being the employment center and light industrial, 26% residential, and 22% planned development. We also looked at development activity in the area from December of 2016 to March of 22. Approximately 730 acres had been developed in a little over 5 years. It was mostly residential, with 433 acres being residential. Industrial was 188 acres, institutional 70 acres, and commercial 37 acres. We also looked at water and sewer, and the in-city areas are served with water and sewer, and there are existing and proposed lines in the extreme northwest of the study area, some of which extend into Kernersville. We also looked at the watershed, and the area is mostly within the Oak Hollow and City Lake general watershed areas that allow 70% built-upon areas, and there are smaller portions that are in the watershed critical area, Tier 4, which is restricted to 50% built-upon area or 2 dwelling units per acre. There are 12 planned roadway projects that will impact the development of this area. To mention a few are the Johnson Street Sandy Ridge Road widening with a median, multi-use path, and sidewalk. Estimated completion is 2026. The Macy Grove I-40 interchange, which is estimated to be completed in 2033. We have Piedmont Parkway Extension and Gallimore Dairy Road Extension, which are both developer-driven projects, which means that they will be built as development, as the development community provides development in that area. And then the full list of road projects is in the document on page 13. After compiling all of the existing policies and conditions and looking at the proposed infrastructure improvements, it was determined that there was little change needed to the city's land use policies at this time. Ultimately, we are recommending 2 areas of policy change, being areas B and H, and 1 area that will need a land use plan amendment, being area D. Now I'll just go into a little detail about those areas. Area B is approximately 536 acres. It's generally bounded by West Fork of the Deep River to the west, I-40 to the north, various property lines to the east, and property lines just north of Boylston Road to the south. It's currently about 50% inside and outside the city limits. It is proposed to go from Airport Overlay Zone 2 to 4, which has no use restrictions, just notification of potential noise from aircraft overflights. It is adjacent to the Piedmont Commerce Center in Kernersville, located north of I-40, and it is west of High Point North Industrial Center, formerly known as 350 South. There is existing and proposed water and sewer in this area. there are planned transportation improvements in this area, being the I-40 widening, Macy Grove interchange, and the Gallimore Dairy Road extension. The Northwest Area Plan covers this area, and it supports low-density and medium-density residential west of the West Fork Deep River tributary. And staff could support all medium or higher density depending on the timing of the development and what other non-residential uses may be present at the time of development. If development needing water and sewer is proposed, it will have to be annexed into the city, and at that time it will be evaluated as to whether the city has the ability to provide the full array of services such as fire, police, solid waste, etc. If annexation is feasible, then original zoning will be determined and amendment to the land use plan will be made if needed. The second area of policy change is Area H. It's approximately 438 acres. It's generally bounded by Sandy Ridge Road tributary to the north, East Chester Drive to the east, Willard Dairy Road to the south, and various property lines to the west. It's currently about 50% inside and outside the city. It is proposed to go from Airport Overlay Zone 2 to 3, so residential will be allowed utilizing noise level reduction standards. It is currently classified as restricted industrial on the land use map. Therefore, it is recommended for employment center zoning. The frontage along NC 68 is within the East Chester Corridor overlay. The policy recommendation is to leave it as restricted industrial for now, and to support some higher density residential as allowed in the employment center zoning district behind the frontage lots of NC 68, which would typically be outside the East Chester Gateway Corridor and require the residential to gain access from the side streets such as Kleinert Farms and Willard Dairy Road. The objective is to preserve the NC 68 corridor for traditional restricted industrial uses to help maintain the efficient functionality and appearance of this major gateway into the city.
Can you say that again, please? That last sentence you read?
About the preserving NC 68 corridor, the objective is to preserve the NC 68 corridor for traditional restricted industrial uses to help maintain the efficient functionality and appearance of the major gateway into the city. In other words, not to allow a lot of residential and driveway cuts on 68, so to keep that residential, which is multifamily, which is allowed in the EC district, towards the back of that property that fronts on 68. Does that help?
Yes, thanks.
The last area is Area D, which is recommended for a land use plan amendment. It's approximately 420 acres. It's generally bounded by Sandy Ridge Road to the north, Kleinert Farms Road to the east, the alignment of the future Piedmont Parkway to the south, and Sandy Camp Road to the west. The majority is currently outside city limits. However, horsepower and part of a PUD development at the intersection of Kleinert Farms and Barrow Road are inside the city limits. This area is proposed to go from AR Zone 2 to 3, so residential utilizing the noise level reduction will be allowed. It is recommended that the majority of this area remain designated as restricted industrial on the land use map. However, with a minor expansion of the low-density residential along the future Piedmont Parkway extension on the southern end, and if requested, residential could be expanded further north due to being in watershed critical tier 4, which limits development to 50% built upon area, and being changed to the AR3, which will allow residential. This area may be a case of whoever gets there first. We'd like to keep the majority of it and reserve for restricted industrial, but if a residential proposal does come along that makes sense, then a plan amendment could be supported for that area. I'd also like to note that there's approximately a 37-acre local convenience commercial area shown in pink at the future intersection of Piedmont Parkway Extension, Barrow Road Extension, and Kleinert Farms Road. It will be important to maintain this local convenience commercial to serve the commercial node for the future growth of the northwest quadrant of this city's planning area. So in summary, again, we are recommending in this evaluation for 2 policy changes and 1 land use plan amendment. This evaluation document comes to you from the Planning and Zoning Commission with a recommendation to approve by a vote 7-0. Do you have any questions of me before I turn it over to Chris to go over the zoning changes? Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Clinton.
Thank you, Heidi. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Chris Andrews, Development Administrator. Heidi mentioned that previous analysis and an aspect of, or one of the three aspects of it was examining the zoning, the overlay zones for the airport overlay district. These are the same as what was proposed or presented to council about a year ago now, so you've seen these a few times. So city staff, we considered these recommendations. We proposed the needed amendments. We held an open house at the end of June this year, solicited comments from the development community through Build High Point and email blast and that sort of thing. So just want to give that background as this is a zoning change. So this is, it's a legislative change, much like a text amendment or a zoning map amendment. So with that background, we'll get into ZA 22-21. And this is the zoning map amendment for the airport overlay district. This is a good reminder, a good time for a reminder for council and the general public that this overlay district is much like a historic district. This is added on top of the base zoning, but this does need to go through the same process as a regular zoning map amendment. So this is kind of in addition to. The previously mentioned assessment recommended 8 areas of change, and these are shown on the screen. Areas A through H, Area A is certainly the largest. That is, it's mostly within the county, but that is area that's being proposed to be completely taken out of the airport overlay district, so there would be no restrictions there. The other 2 districts that I'll note or the other 2 zones that I'll note, or I apologize, the other areas as they're referenced, areas F and area G, those are the 2 areas that we're proposing to kind of increase in intensity or in increasing the requirements there. But overall, we're removing or kind of downgrading the standards for quite a large area. Currently, the district is about almost 12,000 acres, and the proposed amendment would remove about 3,000 acres from the district. So if there's any specific questions about the zones, we certainly use geographic features, some of the modeling from the airport to try to determine where those zones are at. Have to take into consideration the existing built environment as well. But with that, there are consistency and reasonableness statements within the staff report for your consideration. And I will note, staff, we did receive a fair number of calls about this initiative, and especially as we were getting closer to the public hearing process, there were quite a few inquiries about flight paths and whether the city could control that at the airport. People were dejected to know that no, we could not do that, but certainly helped them with understanding of how the airport runs. Just want to offer that at the August 23rd meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of this item by a vote of 5-3. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. Otherwise, I'll pass it back to Heidi for the land use plan amendment.
This will be a presentation of Land Use Plan Amendment 2204. The request is to amend 19 parcels that lie between Sandy Camp Road and Kleinert Farm Road north of the future Piedmont Parkway extension, as recommended in the Airport Overlay District Land Use Policy Evaluation that I just presented to you. The subject area is outlined with a black dash on this map. It consists of approximately 77 acres. The request is to amend the land use plan from a restricted industrial classification to the low-density residential classification. Restricted industrial accommodates office, warehouse, research and development, distribution, and light manufacturing or assembly uses on larger sites in a unified development. The low-density residential classification is primarily intended for single-family detached dwellings on individual lots, and development densities in these areas shall not exceed 5 dwelling units per acre. Surrounding land use classifications are restricted industrial to the north, shown in purple, low-density residential to the south, shown in yellow, medium-density residential to the west, shown in brown, and local convenience commercial to the east, shown in pink. Surrounding land uses to the north is horsepower, which is an agricultural use, rural residential single-family dwellings, and an undeveloped parcel. To the east is agriculture, to the south is the Alderbrook single-family subdivision, to the west is the Alderbrook subdivision and rural residential single-family dwellings. Staff prepared the staff report and noted that the land use plan and overlay district policy evaluation are relevant to this request. The land use plan supports and encourages development that enhances and preserves established neighborhoods and that protects and preserves environmentally sensitive locations, including designated open space and watershed critical areas from inappropriate development. The policy evaluation recommends this amendment because it is part of Area D that is recommended to go from Airport Overlay Zone 2 to 3, which allows residential that meets the 30 decibel noise level reduction standards. It is in the Oak Hollow Lake Watershed Critical Tier 4, which limits development to 50% built upon area. And because it is located between the existing low-density residential Alderbrook subdivision and the agricultural use of horsepower. Staff recommends approval of the request because it is supported by the land use policies and it is in alignment with the recommendations of the Airport Overlay Policy Evaluation. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended in favor of this request by a vote of 5-3 at their August 23rd meeting. Do you have any questions of me before I turn it back to Chris for the text amendment?
Nope.
Thank you.
It's like a tag team.
We're trying to do these in a logical way that once, one is approved, then the next, and the next. So, so thank you for bearing with us. But the text amendment TA 22-03 is comprised of the changes that go along with the Airport Overlay District proposed amendments. And just as a reminder, and this is stated in the development ordinance, that these standards only apply to properties within the city of High Point city limits. There are no regulatory changes that are proposed with the text amendment. The text amendment really seeks to better define what the boundaries of the proposed area or the proposed zones. So giving some general description of those, the description of the applicability of the district as a whole. I will note that the planning staff, we originally had proposed requiring an navigation easement for developments that were within the Airport Overlay District. After hearing from some members of the public and kind of just assessing as staff, we opted not to include that. So that would have been a text amendment as well to add to the standards, but we opted not to do that. So again, there's a consistency and reasonableness statement that's included with the staff report for your consideration. And then, much like the other items, this was voted on by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their August meeting with a favorable vote of 5-3. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes, Mr. Moore.
In the southwest quadrant of the photo here, why do we have that one small area left for rural development? I mean, I love rural. I'm a big fan of rural. We run it to death, but, I mean, why do we have that left there?
That is part, and you'll see it's adjacent to our future growth area, and that is just an area for which it would be costly to extend water and sewer. So I think that's why we have it in the rural development and the future growth area. But as you are aware, we are about to embark on a comprehensive plan, which will take a whole fresh look at all of our land use plan and land uses, and I would expect to see some changes in the overall land use plan when it's brought forth.
If you can bring back small farms, I'll vote for that.
We all love small farms.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, thank you, staff. Are you finished handing off? Okay, good. All right, good. All right, so the public hearing is open. And I'm just, because there's very few people left, and I know why y'all are here. We're just going to take comment on all four of these cases. So if you want to come up and talk about any of this, now's your opportunity. Thank you for being patient.
Thank you for sitting there for 3 hours to talk.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
That's all right. Thank you very much for giving us a couple minutes to speak. Appreciate the time. I'm going to be really brief, okay? We have a housing crisis. You guys heard that several times tonight, right? It's pretty obvious. We're 4,000 units short, just multifamily here in the Triad. Single family, we've got affordability issue. We've got a housing crisis coming. We've got a bigger housing crisis coming because we've got all these great jobs that are coming to High Point, which is phenomenal, which we are so excited about. But here's what's happening, guys. This airport overlay is phenomenal. We so much appreciate the hard work that staff has done. We love the clawback, but it's not enough, okay? When you look at PTI's update that they did in 2021, and you look at the newest map they came out with, they used the DNL, which I understand is very different than the approach that High Point Consultant used many years ago, which is the NA. And the FAA follows the DNL, HUD follows the DNL, Department of Defense, City of Greensboro. I could go on and on and on. High Point's the only one we can find that uses this NA approach. And when you look at the maps of what the DNL is versus High Point's maps, High Point is so extreme. They are so conservative. And when you look at 65 DNL, okay, that's kind of the baseline that they say, don't build residential, 65 or higher, right, without some sound abatement. That's not a good thing. That's what FAA, HUD, everybody says. When you look at this map, that blue line is 65. It doesn't leave the airport property. That red is 60. This is Interstate 40. This is Highway 68. There's 1 and 2. What I'm trying to say is what we've been working with for years and years has restricted your land use development, has restricted the ability to allow you guys to continue to get more development. You can't get retail up here to accommodate all these rooftops because retail wants rooftops. Right now, you've got a great land use plan, but it shows all purple, which is heavy industrial. That doesn't bring the retail that you need for all the developments that have happened in areas 3 and 4, or the neighborhood in Fraser Downs, or all the other continued development you're going to have. And so what I would like to ask is that we take a look at how do we help our housing crisis here in High Point. Could we look at a text amendment in zones 1 and 2 that allow development, a very restricted development, okay? Maybe it's multifamily development in which you have the sound abatement, taking it down 30 decibels like you have in 3. You have the waivers. You restrict it to 1 owner, right? Multifamily, because then you can do the sound abatement better, right? But how do we solve this housing crisis together? I think that is the most important thing. And, the approach High Point used, I think it needs a reevaluation nicely. So I'm going to let Barry speak. I know he's got a comment. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My name is Barry Siegel and Amanda Williams, and she's a hard act to follow, okay? But the reality is that we do have a housing crisis. And this area is prime real estate. And I think the most important thing to take into consideration in the discussion this evening is to look at the update. Okay, the latest update very clearly shows, and it's stated, okay, in all the documents, that there should be virtually no restrictions outside the airport's property, okay, in areas in which the DNL, okay, is 65 or less. And in the case of High Point, okay, the 65 DNL and greater occurs completely in the airport's property. On the Greensboro side, okay, Greensboro made a decision to be a little bit more restrictive and a little bit more conservative than the FAA and HUD and DOD. And they basically said from the 65 DNL to the 60 DNL, very narrow area, okay, going down Horseman Creek, they will permit residential development, but require a 30 dB reduction, which is the same thing that High Point's been doing in Zone 3. Now, without trying to get too technical and too complicated here, there's a big difference in the approach that Weil Laboratories took back in the early 2000s. Right? In the early 2000s, they kind of said, you know, maybe one of the things we also need to look at is the possibility of disturbance. What is the possibility that someone could be disturbed in the evening? And so they applied an approach that was called number of events, NA, and the NA attempted to try to model, okay, the possibility that someone within a particular zone could be disturbed during that 24-hour period. That NA approach uses some parameters in it, and one of them, without getting too complicated here, is the SEL, which basically looks at the event of an airplane, and it takes the sound that's spread out over that event and compresses it, so it's a peak, right? So what it does is it really exaggerates the decibel level in that zone. And so what the computer's trying to do is to try to define a zone in which there's an event that could be greater than 90 dB. But in reality, because of that compression, that 90 dB is really not 90 dB. It is exaggerated by as much as 15 dB. So that event could be a 75. And the fact is, people don't sleep outside. High Point requires, Greensboro requires, even the FAA requires in areas where you have above a 65 dB, a 30 decibel, okay, reduction in terms of the sound abatement from outside to inside. So what does that mean? That means if you follow that guideline that you've been following in Zone 3 and require, okay, in these areas that we're talking about, okay, you will have a 30 dB reduction. And even in the case of where you have this peak projected NA zone, okay, in 2025, okay, the reality is inside the house, you should be well below, okay, the requirements that you need to go. All right. I can talk about a lot of stuff here because I got a real education when I reached out to this PhD, Norrell Stewart, that some of you have heard about, and I said, please review these documents, please help educate me, all right? What is High Point doing? Is this right? Okay, or is this wrong? And I don't think there's a right or a wrong, but what there is an extreme conservatism that is severely limiting the potential growth of High Point. And one of the things Dr. Stewart enlightened me on is not only the fact that it's FAA and HUD, who we all know is very conservative, and DOD, but virtually, okay, all the airports, okay, and all the communities in North Carolina, South Carolina, and other places that he has studied are all using the DNL approach, the day, the night, okay, average level approach. And I agree, it's a level approach, okay? But it puts a heavy weighting on the nighttime flights. So I think the short version is, okay, we support the changes that were presented here this evening, okay, in the airport overlay. We're requesting that City Council give consideration to a text amendment in zones 1 and zones 2. And we've been so bold after some discussion to actually go ahead and propose, okay, a basic guideline for future discussion and or perhaps consideration by council. And specifically, what we've proposed is that in zone 1, okay, that residential development be permitted provided that it was one owner for the lot of record. In other words, not individual single-family homes, not individual townhomes, not individual condominiums, but permit, okay, institutional type, okay, real estate, whether they be apartments or whether they be some other type of housing. And also open up so many of those areas that have now been restricted. Require 30 decibel reduction, require notification, okay, require height limitations and so forth and so on. And in zone 2, okay, to open that up just a little bit more, but still also restricting it to multifamily, but permit townhomes and twin homes, okay, that can be more easily dealt with in terms of sound attenuation. And the fact is that the people that live in multifamily dwellings are not really have the same lifestyle as people do in single-family homes. They are not outside as much. They come, they go, they work, okay, they come home, and just as long as we, okay, realize that 30 dB sound reduction as we were elsewhere. The one last thing I want to say is if you look at all these maps that are in the reports, and some that Amanda showed, you'll see a lot of change from the initial study, 2014 projection back then, 2025, and 2040. Okay, there's been a lot of changes that have occurred over the years in terms of the airplanes and the flights, okay, and you know, frankly, the NA approach, by and large, is based upon models, okay? And so the input that you put in will, you know, have a great deal of impact. So for the benefit of High Point, we are asking that you give some consideration to open up Overlay District 1 and 2 before all that property is continued to be developed now in Guilford County. And if you drive through that area, you will see individual homes being built, okay, under Guilford County regs that are situated now and taking up your prime real estate. You will see little bits of commercial being developed. And the loser here is High Point, because if we wait for another 5 years or another 10 years for another update and then maybe realize that, geez, we were a little too conservative again, it may be too late. You may no longer have control of that property. Even though it falls in your jurisdiction, it may be eaten up. So I would encourage you to please give some consideration to them. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I'm sure Amanda will as well.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Anybody have questions for these folks? Okay. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this? Yes, sir. Just come forward and give us your name and address for our record. Thank you.
My name is Stephen Gossett. I'm actually from Johnson City, Tennessee, but I grew up in the 1960s and 70s right on Kleiner Farms Road. So that's why I'm here today. Gossets have been living on Kleiner Farms Road now for 5 generations. But as you go to the airport and you pass by Gossett's Landscapes Nursery, that's my second cousin. That's not us. But there is an old family farm, the remnants of it, 44 acres, and me and a bunch of my aunts and uncles and cousins own it. And we've been, you know, I like rural too. And it was nothing but rural on Highway 68 for a long, long time. But the time has come for the family farm needs to have a better use put to it. We've had it over 22 years. It's been restricted for industrial commercial. We've not been able to consider any residential. So when I heard that this was in the works, we're very happy to see it come in parts of our property, maybe better use for residential. So we're very happy to see it proposed, and it is in the city limits already. So we fully support the amendments that you're looking at. And I hope as you deliberate on further changes, please don't delay this, because we need to go ahead with this part, and you can continue to negotiate with these other folks as you choose. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Costa.
Anyone else like to speak? Anyone else? Now's your chance. Go ahead, and I'll get you, Ed, after. I know. I knew that wouldn't hurt your feelings at all.
My name is Bill Cook. I'm General Counsel for the Airport Authority, and I'm here with Bill Bencini, which I know is very familiar in these chambers, and is your appointee to the Airport Authority. This is a matter that rests in your judgment, but I would like to respond to a few points. First of all, 20 years ago, High Point City Council did make a judgment about whether DNL was an appropriate measure for High Point, considering the late-night cargo operations that were anticipated. DNL is not what wakes you up at night. It is an average of noise that occurs over the course of the day. And as Mr. Siegel said, it does have a nighttime penalty. But the judgment of the city of High Point was to look at what is the noise when the plane flies over at 11, 12, maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and to look at that rather than the day-night average. They did look at SEL, and Mr. Siegel did describe that accurately. SEL takes the entire noise over the duration from the time you first hear the plane until you no longer hear the plane as it passes over. And it compresses that into a 1-second interval. But that's regarded as being an appropriate measure because disturbance relates not just to the volume of the noise, but has a lot to do with the duration of the noise. So SEL takes that into account, and that's the reason why Wiley Laboratory recommended SEL. I think the final point that we would make is, and Ms. Galante used to characterize this, I think, quite accurately when she said, this is the low tide in the noise environment around the airport. The airport is perfectly situated for a cargo operation. The very factors that brought FedEx here, if FedEx isn't the one to expand, will bring in another cargo operation. As you know, e-commerce is booming. We are centrally located in the eastern United States. We have excellent highway connections. You cannot improve on the highway connections to our airport. That is very important to a cargo hub. And then to accommodate FedEx, we built the airport infrastructure with the 2 parallel runways, which is ideally adapted to a cargo operation. It enables you to land a lot of planes in a hurry, which is very important with time-critical deliveries that cargo operations have. It gives you redundancy. If one runway is out, you're still going to be able to get your planes in, maybe a little later, but you'll get the packages delivered in New York or Miami or wherever it is they got to go the next morning. And we've got a site in between the parallel runways, which is ideal for cargo operations. There was comparison with the city of Greensboro, and again, I think Ms. Galante had the right response to this. The majority of the traffic in this cargo operation on arrival is over High Point. On departure from the cargo operation is over High Point. And so that presents a situation that you don't have on the Greensboro side, where there's going to be less overnight traffic. So I will in where I started, this is a matter that is in your good judgment to decide. But I would suggest you consider these factors.
So this is Councilman Moore, so you're stating that the arrivals and departures are coming both from the High Point side?
Yeah, and the reason for that, so the FedEx facility, the cargo hub where the planes have to go, is on the north end of the field. So when a plane is coming in from the south, once it stops, it's at the northeast end of the field. If you come from the opposite direction, then the plane on arrival has got to turn around and taxi all the way the length of the runway back to the sort hub. It's the opposite on departure. If you leave and depart to the south towards High Point, you don't have to taxi away all the way to the end of the runway and then back to take off to the north.
Well, I've flown out there quite a bit, and I do have my private license. So you're saying they're flying in because of wind direction, mainly on the Honda Jet side and departing on the new side?
They're flying in towards the north, towards the northeast in the five direction, and they're turning around and departing in the 23.
So they're using two separate runways, which is...
They're using both runways, yes. But in either case, the majority of the traffic is over High Point.
Okay.
And they do that, usually a plane will fly into the wind and it's unidirectional, but a cargo hub operates on a stopwatch.
Yep.
And so they will tolerate a tailwind, the cargo aircraft will, greater than normal, because it makes a big difference in the timing to be able to get in and out more quickly.
Well, I've been to Memphis, so I don't know if you've been out there, but, but they all come in from the same direction.
Yes.
All of them. So that may be a little bit different. And I hadn't been out there in several years, but when I was out there, that was a little different setup than we got here.
Right. But we do want to see sensible development within the approaches to our runways. And what you have in the land use plan is commercial, industrial, the purple. That, we believe, would be more sensible development than putting housing there.
Thank you. Ed, you're up.
I think y'all heard enough.
Okay, all right. I'll make sure you got your chance. All right, anybody else want to speak?
Yes, this is Councilman Holmes.
Let me close the public hearing.
Sure, of course.
Now, I will recognize you. Yes, sir.
In terms of impact, I've lived in Alderbrook for 14 years, and it's not something that we consider. We have houses that stay on the market for hours and not days, and so when we look at that as an impact and how the effect of whether or not people are affected by flight patterns and things like that, it's to me negligible. So if that's a consideration, you can take it from someone who's lived there for 14 years in a flight path. It's not something that I considered when I moved there. It's not something that I'm bothered by. So for whatever that opinion is worth, I offer that for consideration.
I've heard from a number of council folks and some others that they would like to have some more time to consider this. And I spoke with the manager, and she's willing for us to have a work session to discuss it in a little bit more detail before we make a decision. And I personally think that's warranted. I want to make a motion. Can I make one motion to continue all four of these, or do I have to make four motions?
To continue each one, because we're going to vote on each.
Okay, we're going to do this 4 times. All right. So the only question I'm throwing out for council to consider is whether to continue this to the 17th of October or to our first meeting in November, which would be on the 7th.
First meeting in November, just to give enough time for workshop. Also, I know there are a number of organizations who want to weigh in. They're going to want to hear what we're talking about, what we think, and then weigh back in.
All right, well, then I'm going to make a motion to continue item 2022-434, the policy evaluation to our November 7th meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously. I also make a motion to continue zoning map amendment case 22-21 to our November 7th meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously. I will make a motion to continue Plan Amendment 22-04 to our November 7th meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously. I'll make a motion to continue text amendment case 22-03 to our November 7th meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by the Mayor Pro Tem. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes, and so those four cases are continued to our November 7th meeting. We have several items, general business. First one is reappointment of John Mancini and John Thomas to the Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority, and I move for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that
Mr.
motion
Mayor,
passes unanimously. Yes?
Before we keep going, just because I know he's about to leave, Ed, I just want to say it was so good seeing you.
Yeah, man.
We sincerely are glad to see you up. Ed has meant so much to our community and has been a public servant for years and has supported a number of causes. And Ed, I have to tell you, I'm pretty sure it's a consensus amongst this dais that we are glad to see you up, glad to see you here, and we appreciate you sincerely. Yeah.
Yep. Good to see you, Ed.
Good to see you, Ed.
I hate to say what I was doing when I had instructions, newspapers here.
You might want that in the paper, Ed.
Fast forward, 40-year version of me.
Okay. There's also, next item is the appointment of Alyssa McLaughlin to the Historic Preservation Commission, and I move for approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on that item. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Next is the appointment of David Blackman to the Historic Preservation Commission. I move for approval.
Second.
In motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously. We have some minutes to be approved, and I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second for approval of the minutes. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes. Only thing I have to say before the adjournment is Rockers made the playoffs. Get your tickets. It'll be a game Friday night.
Friday night.
All right. Anybody got anything else they want to add?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. There's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously, and we're adjourned.